I think when it comes to these books, these little children books, there's no reason to feel the need to like return to the past and have some traditional outlook. There's no reason. They're like little kids reading about a magic chocolate factory and not talking about how racism affects like the history of this artist and this like author in the time where he grew up in American society and like how we it's just not important. So that's why it's so fundamentally different. They're just barely even, honestly, not even comparable at all.
Welcome to yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today we are discussing the recent edits to the works of Roald Dahl, as well as other works such as the Ian Fleming's James Bond and other such post hoc, post-publication edits that are done without the consent of the author. There's a lot of chatter about this. Some people say it's really, really dangerous and really bad. Other people say it's no big deal. I brought together kind of a mixed bag of people on both sides of the aisle on this, and we're just kind of going to get into it. I'm going to give you each brief opening statement, concise, please, and then we'll just kind of go ahead and talk about it. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to my audience for being here. And once again, apologies. When Kidology gets here, we'll just slaughter in. But for now, let's just get started. And we will start with the one, the only, Cypher. Go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm Cypher, also Crowdsource Politics. So if you see me talking in chat and you're wondering who the hell is Crowdsource Politics, that's me. So to make this clear and concise as possible, I don't give a shit. I don't care that we're doing sensitivity readers. I don't care if the author approves of them or not. They are dead. Their opinion is no longer relevant. What matters is what maybe the intellectual property holder says, or what we as not necessarily a society, but what we kind of want to propagate within kind of the whole confines of everything. So yeah, that's where my position is.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you coming by. And yeah, we'll get into it in the opening. Next up, we have Parallax, please.
I think that it is absolutely absurd. I think that there are far more important things to care about. Don't get me wrong. I empathize with the idea of not caring insofar as there are greater issues, but it is an absolutely fundamentally flawed thing to do to be editing the already published works of authors. Henry Louis Gates Jr. is quoted as saying, "Censorship is to art as lynching is to justice." We are absolutely destroying these works by changing them from what their original works were. We are destroying the original intent of the author, which is very, very important. Censorship is absolutely absurd, especially for already published works. And what are you doing here if you don't give a fuck, Cypher? Just kidding. I love you.
We can get into it.
Thank you for being here. Parallax, I appreciate you, and we'll get into it in the open. Next up, Double Shine, please.
Yeah, so I think that with all of these changes, really there's a bit of a red herring, and that's that it's not about whether or not we want to change or if any changes can be made, but at what level are we comfortable with changes being made. I'm sure, or actually I'd be shocked if anyone defended the original work of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that depicted the Oompa Loompas as African pygmies imported to work in the factory. But it seems like nobody really cares about that change, and rather they're a little bit more focused on these incredibly trivial changes that don't really impact the story and are just getting rid of a couple negative connotations that we perhaps don't want associated with children's books. Personally, I think the changes are entirely their right to change, and I don't see any issue with the story being changed. And I also don't really know if there's any issue with these minor changes as opposed to something like Huckleberry Finn or To Kill a Mockingbird, where I would be a lot more opposed to racial epithets being removed from those pieces of literature, which I think are at a higher reading level, where I think students would be more comfortable exposed to those and discussed in a classroom setting.
I am going to be curious to explore what you think the difference is
Can't
there,
wait.
but we will find out in the opening. But thank you for being here, Double. You are my favorite soy soldier. I appreciate you, and you're always welcome. Next up, we have Ice Beans, please.
Hey everyone, I'm Ice Beans, and I can generally agree that like our society, and particularly progressives, have kind of progressed to the point where most of us don't think that women are shit, like apart from like Andrew Tate and his sorry saps. Like, we accept people of different body types. We don't call people retards anymore. Generally we just know better. But I also strongly believe that the way to keep progressing these societal norms is not to go back and like attempt clumsy rewrites of these like problematic books. Particularly when there's so many other ways that we could achieve the same goals. I think the rewrites of Dahl's books in particular are foolish and like really badly done. And if we want to promote more inclusive views, then I think we should be focusing on the authors and books that are being released now. And focus on releasing those works ourselves. That's basically the gist of my point of view.
Okay, thank you for being here, Ice Beans. Always a pleasure. And first time guest on my show. We'll see if it'll be the last or not. Shark Zero, hello.
Hello, hope you're well.
Hi, what's your thoughts?
Sure. So, we go through this time and time again when it comes to these sort of like ebbs and flows and culture wars. It's most of the time I've ever seen any of these since it started to pick up ever since Trump's presidency. It's worthless, meaningless, cynical, and just lame belly aching about things that don't matter. And it seems like this is about the same as we typically have. The edits to books get edited all the time. Not only do they get edited, they constantly get edited. They always were edited. You've never seen an unedited version of almost any of these books. I know like some people, the way in which I've seen a lot of people talk about this is like, oh, it's my childhood. Oh, I read it like this, or I read it like that. Well, that's good for you. But these books are still being published, and somebody's name is tied to these books. And I'm not sure. I don't think. Actually, a lot of people were trying to say that like Dahl's opinion isn't being taken into account here. It absolutely is. His opinion was set into his estate, which he gave the rights to, and they give the rights to somebody else. That's how it works. That's how he decided that he was going to have it done, and that's how it was done, and now we're here. I just don't see how this is much of an issue. Most of the edits seem perfectly fine and keeping the same sort of like vibe that the book was giving off, and they're more suitable to children these days. There are way more important things to talk about, and I think it's usually pretty cynical since we're going through actual book burnings with books about minorities being taken off the shelves every single day, especially in places like Texas. But now we're gonna bellyache about this one. It means literally nothing.
Well, just in time, we have the last guest. Hello.
Hi. Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to connect Discord to my live stream.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
No, you're just in time. We've just gotten through your openings, and the last opening is for you. So once you're ready and you're ready to turn on your camera, if you could just give us kind of a brief kind of TLDR of your opening thoughts, and then we'll just get into discussion.
Great. Can you see me, by the way?
No,
No.
not yet.
No.
No. Oh, okay.
So your camera source should be like OBS virtual cam, I believe. Virtual camera.
If you're using OBS, yeah.
Yeah, if you're using Streamlabs, it should be Streamlabs OBS virtual cam webcam.
Also, if that doesn't
you
work,
mean-
you may have to turn off your camera in OBS to turn it on in Discord.
Got it.
And if you're not familiar with Discord, do you see us?
Look at how helpful everyone is. Look at how helpful.
Resolution, the source, frame rate. Okay, I'm just gonna
All right.
go.
Hold on a moment. Kidology, what streaming software are you using?
Ecamm Live.
Huh?
Ah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I
if you're
know it.
using Windows, you can't have two camera sources going at the same time. So we might not be able to see you if you've already started your stream and you're live with your camera, unless it has the ability to do virtual camera as well. There we go.
Oh,
There
there
you
we
go.
go. We fixed
Nice.
it. We solved it.
Okay.
You're good. You're good.
Yes, I'll
Do
just
you?
let me just go live.
Look at all this mansplaining.
So sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I feel bad now.
She asked
No,
for it.
it's
It's
fine.
fine.
It's okay.
Mansplaining. Oh boy.
Okay. I just hope that it's working with the audio, and I hope that there's somebody there in the world. But yes. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, welcome. Kidology, what are your thoughts on the Roald Dahl edits and the other edits going on with the A.M. Fleming's books as well and other sources?
What are my thoughts
Yeah, just your opening thoughts.
Okay, so I think a distinction needs to be made between right. Sorry, how long do I have to do this? Can I just
Well,
ask?
concise is better, but take the time you
Concise.
need.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just make it sort of a few sentences. I think that this isn't about the woke. I think that this is about businesses trying to respond to Gen Z and Gen Z coming of age more than anything, and sort of their interpretation of what Gen Z is as a consumer. So I don't think this is about woke necessarily. And I think with regards to sensitivity readers, it's moved from sort of being a matter of an alive author and writer actually going to somebody for research purposes in order to find out about certain things that they may need to know about certain individuals and cultures or what have you, to it being about trying to rebrand or create a brand around dead authors, Roald Dahl most notably, and trying to make money from their name. So yes, I think that this is about a sort of new kind of sensitivity reader emerging, which is more so about consultancy and publication houses making as much money as possible. So yes.
Okay, we'll get into it. And yeah, if you guys have trouble, just briefly raise your hand. Don't sit there like a schoolgirl with your hand raised the whole time. I will see it. I will get to you. But otherwise, have at it. What do we think, gang?
Actually, I'd like to start with something that Double Shine brought out in your intro. And you said that the edits to Dahl's work don't really affect the story. And I'd like to push back a little bit on that, because some of these not only affect the story but also make the implication of the context worse. Like, for example, as like the biggest example that I can think of is the edits that they've made to like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the part where he's talking about the Oompa Loompas. Now it's like, oh, they all agreed to come over. It's not, oh, I put them in a box and they were fine the whole time. It's like, here, let me find it. But basically it makes it sound way fucking worse. It makes it like, it actually looks like they're like trying to, gaslight you to thinking that they actually agreed to just come over and they're really happy. And it's all just because they removed the whole part where like Willy Wonka just looks like a straight up colonialist. And I guess I don't understand why you would think that it doesn't affect the story, I guess.
Sure. So just to be clear, I brought that up, that the idea of having African pygmies that got imported into to go work in his factory, right? I brought that up because I think most people are probably okay with that change because they think that that's a little extreme. And so really the thing that I wanted to kind of criticize was the fact that like all of these new changes, it's we're just arguing about like what level do you feel comfortable making changes to stories, and none of the ones that I saw at least have any large impact on the story. There's obviously been changes in the past to a lot of different children's stories that would have an impact on the story, like you described. It definitely does paint him as a little bit more I guess nice and heartwarming to his like indentured servants, but none of the new changes, I just haven't seen any of the new changes have some massive impact on the story. Like they're not making Matilda trans, it's not Fantastic MX Fox, like, oh, I'm not seeing any of that. It's just these minor changes.
So I want to push back and also build off of something Icebeam said earlier. So if they're not big changes, then why the fuck did they need to make them? That's just that's an absolutely terrible argument. And I would argue that some of these changes are impactful. So I'm a heavy guy. Augustus Gloop getting mocked for being fat was awesome for me. You wanna know why? Because there should be a little bit of shame in being fat. I've lost 140 pounds, and part of that came from being shameful of being a fat piece of shit. Okay? Augustus Gloop is a fat piece of shit. And I wish they would heighten the language. I think there should be a little shame in it.
Okay, bro, listen, you don't have to.
Hold on, I'm not done. I'm also going to build on what Ice Beans was saying earlier. The other important part of this is it does not allow us to show where we've come from. If we're going to go back and edit these works in the past, we don't get to look at contemporaneous works and see how authors have evolved in the way they have written. It just takes away any level of growth and any demonstration of that change.
Okay, I mean,
A few people want to respond. Go ahead, Shark, and then Ice Beans.
you don't have to like mirror all of your like own self-pity onto like the rest of us, like simply because you
That's
felt
cute, but
better,
it's not what I'm
simply
doing.
because
You
you
gotta
felt
let them
better because
respond.
getting
You gotta
shitted
let them
on,
finish. Yeah.
simply because you felt better because you got shitted on for being fat and that helped you like lose some weight. Good for you. It doesn't really matter. What we do know is that shaming people for being fat normally doesn't work and it makes things worse. And we're talking about children here, not grown adults. Shaming children for like who they are and how they look is, well, yes, that's very well known to make their lives better. No, it's not. Just giving a kid a book to simply just bully them isn't going to make their lives better. You can't just bring up your own personal experience and be like, oh, well, this helped me so much. Okay, I don't care. It doesn't matter. These books are simply children's books. There's no high level, high mind, high IQ level, like big brain thinking. No children is going to turn into Gigabrain Sheen because they read Charlie and the fucking Chocolate Factory. That's not going to happen. They're fun, they're entertaining, and they get them to think and imagine and have them spend time doing something other than, I don't know, like throwing baseballs into their neighbors' windows, because that's just like a decent thing to do. And changing these books to make them at least be a little bit nicer and a little bit better and a little bit more in line for how we just think and believe and the values we want to instill in children today, is just not that big of an issue. And if you really want to do that, like, oh, look at all the racism that we did, little kids, then you can do that in class, in English class. You can do it in history, or you can do it when you sit your kids down and read them all of the racism. You can read them the Wikipedia page for all of the ethnic slurs in the world if you want to do that for them. And you can. That's just not, you can just do that in your own time. Doesn't have to be in like the little kids library.
To be clear, the projection thing wasn't the slam dunk you thought it was. I'm not projecting anything. I'm simply saying that
Okay.
there is some value in keeping small details, small descriptors in the way we describe people in previous works. Moreover, you completely failed to address how this completely eliminates the ability for us to see how the way people write and authorship and the way people perceive others has progressed.
I think that basically, like, I just think that, like, if your intent was to essentially remove, like, the negative connotation of fat people, like, the rest of the book doesn't support that, okay? What, in the new movie, are they gonna, like, not call him fat, but then they still have the part where he gets stuck in the fucking pipe? Like, come on. That's, like, if you're going to try to remove that negative connotation from fatness in that book, you're just going to have to dedicate, like, bite the bullet and change the whole damn book. Like, at that point, it's just ridiculous. I guess I just don't get why, and if you, especially when you look at the edits that they made for Doll, and you look at the context that they took those sentences out or whatever, they don't change the rest of the book to fit in with that narrative. They just take out like a word that would imply fatness is bad, and that's it.
Well, just to be clear, because
Can
I
we
think
talk
the
about-
word
Okay.
fat does carry like a much more negative connotation than I think they changed it to enormous,
Yeah, I
which
was
to me
about to
has
say
a
something.
more of like a
That's-
comical or a silly connotation to it.
So
in
wait,
fact,
hold on,
you're
wait,
right,
hold on.
The
Are you-
story hasn't changed. He is still big. He still does get stuck in the pipe, and that is funny. But instead, you're not going around basically calling every single bad character in a children's book fat. Which I know Parallax is clearly happy to like make fun of fat people, but that just historically doesn't work. And I'm sure that for most kids, if every bad character in their story is fat, I don't know if that's going to feel good for them.
Wait, double
Can
check.
we
Why do you
talk
think
about
that? Why do you think that like it's not? Why do you think that the part where he gets stuck in the pipe? Why do you think that that's not insulting to fat people? Then, like, wouldn't you say that that is insulting fatness?
Wait, I mean, it
I
can be
think it's
insulting
so
to fat
silly
people.
and comical that I don't really see it as like a hard insult on fat people. And again, like he is a big character. That's absolutely the case. We can call him fat or enormous. I think at our level, it doesn't really matter to me. But yeah, I just think getting rid of that word fat, ultimately, like it's weird because I feel like you're creating this big thing where it's like it doesn't matter and it's not a big deal, but then you're also outraged over the changes. So to me, it's like, if it's not a big deal,
Okay.
then why are you advocating so
No,
strongly
I'm not
against
saying.
these
Hold on. I'm not
changes?
saying.
Again, that argument cuts both ways.
I'm not saying that it's not a big deal. I do think that some of his works are pretty bad, right? Especially in terms of like what the things they say about women, right? So just as an example, but I just don't think that you can change one word that our current society has decided calling fat. Like you can't just remove the word and do nothing.
Let me interject here because I think we're dancing around something that I want to kind of get into the heart to. Do we think, right? Do we think that there is any value in leaving problematic things in for children's books, like leaving the fact that fat is a negative connotation in a children's book, or leaving the fact that the Oompa Loompas were basically stolen, right? And brought against their will to a thing? Or do we feel that it is better to sanitize these works and children will respond better to it? What are our thoughts here? Because I think that's probably the core of what we're going to disagree on. I could be wrong, but
Sure.
let's
Can I start with that one?
go for it.
So I said I don't care because ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, this particular changes aren't going to matter. But to what Wick just said, I think that there are problematic things about doing that. If we sanitize the entire world and we have this, that we bubble wrap everything, you can read Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind and Coddling of the Next Generation, whatever the heck it was. I don't remember the book title. There is psychological research that suggests that doing these things makes people less resilient, less able to deal with confrontation and other things like that. However, I say however with that because I think that this was ultimately just a marketing ploy to sell more books on an IP that is dying. And so they drummed up some sort of thing we can all be outraged about so people can be like, I'm going to go buy the original copy that they're publishing tomorrow because fuck these woke people.
So is your argument that this is a marketing trick to get us to buy the originals? I mean, maybe.
They've gone back because this is something they've always do. Every single book publisher that does this is that they're like, we're going to publish sensitivity books, and we're like, oh no, there's been pushback. We're going to publish a non-sensitive version. It's the original version. We're going to put it back into print now, and then everybody goes out and buys the original version. And then some people are like, well, I want my kid to know what's going on, so I'm going to buy the sensitive book because I'm that kind of parent or whatever.
For real quick clarification, I also was trying to find information on that, and all I could ever find was essentially that they said that they were going to keep publishing the books because of the backlash. I just wanted to know if that's what you.
They all, when I say they, I mean like publishers in general. I can't speak of this particular publisher, but this is not the first time something like this has happened where pushback has made them go back on their word and publish the original version. I think it's at this point it's a marketing scheme, and it's happened enough times across the industry that we can scratch our heads up like, are they really going to do this type of thing? Because they want to get both sales from both sides of the argument.
Yeah, to kind of address Wick's point about like sanitization, I think that like in like a classroom setting, for example, the original books, or not the original, but as they have been until recently, I think those are probably fine. We can probably talk to, kids about how like being bald as a woman isn't the bad thing without having like a disclaimer about it in the book, like they're trying to add. Those changes are a little bit silly. But I think one of the things about, Roald Dahl books that they are designed for, children, maybe like 6 years, maybe even younger. And for a lot of them, it might be their first time reading a book independently of somebody guiding them through it. And I think that for a parent, I can be a little bit sympathetic. They maybe don't want their kids to be going through some of these books that might have some microaggressions or little terms that just don't really culturally fit in anymore. And just having, I think, a revised version for those parents to give to their children, I think it's perfectly acceptable and a good way to keep their stories relevant. Ice Beans earlier mentioned how, we shouldn't have any changes and stuff like that. Well, what ends up happening when you don't make any changes to these books is they just go out of print. Dr. Seuss saw that with Mulberry Street and If I Ran the Zoo. And those are books that I loved, but the depiction of Asian people in there was horrific. And I think that's fair to make these changes to still keep them modern to children.
By the way, and if you don't mind me going next, just to respond to your point real quick, I actually don't think that that no changes should be made. For example, I'm fine with the Oompa Loompas not being Africans from the deepest, darkest pits of the rainforests of Africa. I'm fine with that, right? It's just that I don't think that we need to be doing that unnecessarily, right? I think that there's a certain line that I have after which I could say, okay, I'm fine with you changing this, but like, yeah, and I
Does
realize it's a
anyone
personal line.
does
But
anyone want to defend that change? Actually, is there anyone who says no, that change itself shouldn't be made? Is there anyone with that argument in here?
I mean, when was it done though? I don't. Wasn't
it was
was
done
he
during.
else
It was
still
done
alive?
during. It was his lifetime. He made the change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then it's not part of the combo.
1973.
Which is a little
It-
different,
it-
right? That's a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
different
Yep.
because he
But-
made the change. What we're
Sounds
talking
like-
about
But
here,
I will say,
is-
I will say that he did specifically say that he did it to de-negro it. So
I
take that
understand.
as you will.
I understand. Okay.
Wait, why? Why is it different?
Well, because in
he
one
made the
case,
choice. He's the author.
the author himself is making the choice to make changes to his work, right? It's like if I went and I edited a work that you did without your consent or knowledge and then said, look what Shark Zero wrote. It's a substantively different thing than you editing your own stuff. That's I
not
think
the
main
same
difference
thing
here.
at all that's happening here. If I sold the rights to all of my videos to you and I said you can change whatever you want and do whatever you want with them because you own the rights, I can't then go back and I think this is just incredible because honestly a lot of the times I've just been seeing this a lot and it's been happening more, but I don't know, I may just be young, but it seems like everyone's favorite person to argue for is someone who's dead because they never disagree with you and they never tell you that you're wrong and they never talk back to you. He gave his estate all of the rights to do whatever they want with the work. They kept it, they printed some books, they made some changes. They sold it to someone else, they kept some of the books, they made some changes. The books aren't dramatically out of character for what he would have written. They're still giving the same similar message, honestly. And I don't believe that, I mean, and we're also not arguing whether or not every single edit that every single editor has ever made in the history of time has ever been good. We're talking about if we can edit these books at all. I just don't see how giving someone rights to what you're doing and then dying and then making changes is somehow like
Does
wrong
anyone
or
want
wrong,
to take that
or-
one?
I don't think I'm specifically
wanna-
not
yeah, go ahead.
arguing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. I just want to give some of the quieter people a chance if they want in here. Parallax has been surprisingly quiet as well as Kidology. So
I
if
have
either of you
been.
want to address
Wow.
this.
I would not have classified myself as quiet until now. Interesting. No, I think it is absolutely. Again, I don't think that it has any merit to argue that because they sold the rights, it somehow does not dilute the original intent of the author. That's again, you're dodging the argument, in my opinion. It does still dilute the original intent of the author, and arguing that because the author sold the rights means that they also sold their intent is completely and utterly false. I've also seen comparisons to like biblical edits, and if you want to get really technical on it, those assholes think they talk to God, so they did talk to the author. And you know, there's really no way to justify this other than justifying it in the context of trying to make people more comfortable around some really soft societal bullshit. It's just
But
Or
it's,
to make
it's impossible for you to know whether or not Roald Dahl would have approved these changes. That's why it's such an easy argument for you to make, because it's impossible to know. And as Shark Zero said, it's completely irrelevant. He's dead. He no longer has those copyright laws. If you don't like copyright law and you want to completely change how intellectual property is distributed, I mean, that's fine, but that's going to be a whole nother battle. Right now, the Roald Dahl story company, they have full rights with Puffin to publish whatever books they want. If they want to do that, Roald Dahl can't come from his grave and stop them.
That's the legal
And
argument.
it should be.
Yeah, that's
It should be
a
also
wildly
Yeah,
uninteresting
just real quick,
angle,
that
like-
is the legal
So-
argument, and I don't think anyone disputes that they have the legal right to do
no
so.
shit.
Legally,
Yeah, that's
they're
what I was gonna say.
incorrect, but we don't base our morals on legality, right? Like, just because something is legal to do does not make it moral
Murder
or
is
right or
bad.
correct. So I'm curious, right? Like, what I guess this gets into what rights do the dead have at the end of the day to having their works and their words respected? Do we feel it is disrespectful to substantively edit the works of the dead? And that's a question, right? And that's, I guess, what we're discussing. So
Wait, is there? Did
okay,
he ever
so-
write
that baby in half.
anywhere? Wait, did he ever write anywhere? And he gave it to his estate in his will. Do not edit any of my books. I love all of my books, and none of them should ever be edited ever again. Every word is my gospel, and all of them are intentional, and they will never be edited ever. Please do not edit them. And he gave it to the court, and the court said you can't edit them when he passed them down to the estate. Did that happen or no? You know?
So I actually think that's a
No, but I don't
fundamentally
think that.
flawed question, because if you take the totality of his statements on editing his works and what he felt about editing and censorship, then yeah, it's pretty fucking clear how Dahl would have felt on this. Claiming I don't know how he would have felt on this, if I take the totality of his statements on censorship and his own works and authoring them, and even look at how he referred to the change he made as Ice Beans referred to it, was a horrible way for him to frame it, because he didn't want to make the changes. He fundamentally was against censorship. This is not a question. No one wonders what Dahl thought about censorship. Nobody.
Also,
I mean,
I
but
don't want to call this censorship, but I'll let you talk. Go ahead. Go ahead.
would if that's the case, then if we're going to say in society we have like copyright laws and they exist for X number of years, and then whoever controls the copyright, because that matters to this debate, then shouldn't he have had some sort of obligation to put that in his will, like Chark was alluding to?
Or tell his estate or his children who
Yeah.
own,
I
it
mean,
now.
to all of our knowledge, he may have told his children. I don't know, right? He may have been like, "Hey, kids, don't you can edit a little bit, but don't ever edit these things out." We don't know, and I think that like we shouldn't have to make these statements. But I'm
But if we're
moderating, so go ahead.
Yeah, but if we're
That's
going
like-
to talk about whether or not this is a moral thing to do, then we need to talk about the personal responsibility that the person has to control their own works after they're dead. Because after so many years, everybody's going to forget about it. And so it's not going to matter anymore, and there's no obligation whatsoever for ever people to guess at what is going to be done, even if it's educated guesses like
You don't believe this.
Parallax
You don't believe
said.
this. You don't believe this.
Oh,
You
how
would
do I
not say-
do I not?
You would not say this of the Mona Lisa. If someone wanted to go paint over it and edit
There's-
it, you would not say
there's
this
a-
of the Mona
there's a
Lisa. You just
difference.
wouldn't. You just,
There's a
no,
difference.
no, no,
you're right.
No,
you're
there's
right.
not.
Let me explain why there's a difference, though. There's a difference because there's only one Mona Lisa. So if you edit that one Mona Lisa, you are fundamentally changing a part of history that cannot be recovered. These are words printed on a page. Their originals exist at somewhere.
Well,
they can be put into a national archive. They
There are
can
so many
even
copies of the Mona
digitally.
Lisa. What are you talking about? There's so many
Just really
millions of the
quickly.
prints.
Just real quick,
Those
just real
prints-
quick, just
those-
Okay.
That's not a bad
hey,
argument.
stop, gang, real quick. So while yes, the originals still exist, recently I was made aware. This was reported on by the Times. That all the digital works, even of those who previously bought these books, have received an update that included the edits without the knowledge or consent of those people who bought it on Amazon Kindle. So in a very real way, those original works in digital form no longer exist.
That's not true.
And I would say
Just
that's a
because you
separate
don't,
argument.
Just because you don't own the original anymore doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Do those people not have object permanence? Are they literal toddlers?
Wait, but they bought one thing and then it turned into another thing.
It didn't turn
They
into
don't have
another. It was
any-
the same book.
Wait, is that
On-
what? Is that
on
what? Is that
ebooks.
what? It's wait. Is
Smarter
that
than
what?
that,
Isn't that what Wick just said? That the copies of the copies on their Kindles changed.
For one, I'm
Yeah,
actually
I'll
pretty
link
sure
the
that you can turn off automatic updates on your ebooks.
But that's not the that's not the point. That's not the point though. That's not the point,
I'm
though.
still talking. Yes, I am serious that
Hey,
I'm
you
pretty
got
sure
you got
that
to let
can
him
turn
finish.
off
You got to let him
automatic
finish. Sark,
updates.
you have the floor. Go ahead.
Yes, I am pretty sure that you can turn off automatic updates. I may be wrong. I don't own a Kindle, but I'm pretty sure you can turn off automatic updates. Those books are still the same book that you bought. They're edited.
No.
And we all know that that publishers are allowed to, you could just look this up right now on Amazon. Do ebooks get updated? And they get updated all the time. If you own a Kindle, you've probably had a couple books that have been updated. This isn't surprising. And on top of the fact that you could still buy the classic version or just read, honestly, you could probably just go online and then just read it for free. If I'm going to be honest, these books are so old, there's probably ways that you could just get it for free. Just because you don't own it anymore and they updated it doesn't mean that it's now gone and disappeared from reality.
So
Yeah, I would
do
s-
I have to?
So
Would I
what-
have
to
to?
be clear,
Am I?
what
Are you
Wick
saying
said-
that I?
One at a
What Wick
time. One
said
at a time.
is the
One at a time.
digital property. The digital property they purchased
Parallax.
no longer exists because it was changed, and that is
Wait, do you feel the same way
Wait,
about a video game?
to be fair, that's totally
And you-
totally wrong. They didn't have that digital property. They
Ice
have
Beans
like
has
the
been trying to
license
talk.
to read it. So
Okay.
like you can't say that the digital property has actually
I
changed
want to give
anymore.
Ice Beans some space here to get out
Well,
what he was trying to
okay.
say.
Listen, I realize this is going into like some digital shit, and of course, I like my initial response is to say, like, do I really have to break my reduce the functionality that I have on my like Audible or whatever account, right, in order to retain the thing that I bought? Like, is that really where I need to go?
Yeah,
But
To
again, that's
just
why
like
that's
turn
why
off
it's a hard.
automatic.
it's a really hard argument because you didn't actually buy that digital property. You just bought the license.
Yeah,
So for
and I
example, when I
understand.
Yeah,
bought
that's why-
Elden Ring, right, and they nerf a weapon in Elden Ring, that they
Right.
didn't steal anything from me, right?
I need a
Because I only have the
refund. It's
license
literally
to
not
play
the same game
game.
anymore.
Oh,
I,
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah,
this is
I-
a
Night and Shade is
fundamentally
nerfed.
different.
It's fucked up.
It just
It's
is.
terrible.
No, I understand. I think that maybe then this particular direction is probably not like it delves more
It's-
into digital
yeah.
rights and shit.
It's
than,
super, super
I would
like,
say this is a
Yeah.
fundamentally separate argument because
It
you know
is.
we want to control what we buy, so it's a different thing.
I want to give some space to Kidology to have some thoughts if you have any currently. Want to give you some time to get in if you want.
About what specifically? Because a
I
lot is being
understand.
said.
It's gone a lot. Anything you'd like
and
to
argued.
say.
Could you give me something specific?
Sure. Do you think that it is a fundament? Like, I guess I will ask you just directly. Do you think that it is morally okay for them to make these changes to the works of Dahl or the works of Ian Fleming or other such things, or do you think that there is a problem with it when it comes to morality or anything like that? What is your thoughts here?
Yes and no. I think, yes, there is something fundamentally wrong morally with this, just based on the fact that being an
what?
author, being a writer. Sorry.
Yeah, what is the moral problem specifically?
Altering their work for profit. And I think this is what this is ultimately about. It isn't about morality. It's about what sells. And you can't really have morality in any kind of market. I think this is more about sort of the financial clout around Roald Dahl's dead name. I mean, in terms of sales of his work, they exceed even that of Michael Jackson. So this is about money over everything. And so I think we've gone sort of past morality. I think this is principally about publishing, consulting a lot of marketing agencies and consultancies about how to target Gen Z and how to target this particular demographic in terms of making money on names that have a lot of value, but which in terms of their morality, such as that of Roald Dahl and his very controversial past and anti-Semitism, trying to sanitize that name in order to make the product viable. I mean, Netflix paid over £500 million just to own the rights to Roald Dahl's characters. That's a lot of money, and there's a lot of interest. So I don't think this is about morality. I think we've long past that right now,
we agree?
about doing the right thing.
I mean, I
Well-
agree that in the sense that like yeah, it does seem like just a like sort of a cash grab, right? And the reason that I think that it's particularly egregious in this case is because if you read Dahl's books, if you've ever read his adult stuff in particular, the nastiness in that is a feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature. Like every single page has some kind of like negative connotation, some insult, some like authorial like flourish. And you can't just like get rid of it and pretend that the rest of it is okay. And so it has to be, and also again, like half of like there, he literally replaced calling a woman a hag with calling her a crow. And I just don't see how that changes anything. Like you functionally replace the same thing. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense when you read the totality of like all of the edits, and especially if you go back and read those edits in the context of the book. Like it just does feel like a cash grab to me. But I think that there is like I don't think that having these books is a problem. Like I'm fine with sanitized versions in general, okay? I don't care. Yes, they have the legal right to do it. They can do whatever they want. If some parent wants to like doesn't want to explain like the problematic elements of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to their kid, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I think that we can do better. I think that we can find other ways to talk about these problematic elements than like going back and just like slapping a censor thing on everything.
I want Cypher to get in. He had his hand up, so go ahead.
Thank you, Wick. So I got a question, and this is kind of a parallel thing. Do people in this discussion have problems with adaptations where something wildly deviates from the original work, but because it's a new medium, it's okay? Like it's not okay because it doesn't hew enough to the original work? Because that's another debate that people are having constantly about everything: anime, books, video games, like all that stuff. And people are like, oh my God, they changed the original work. But it seems like the vast majority of people are like, whatever.
Well, to some degree, you can't create a one-to-one translation, right? If you're going
Sure,
from
sure.
one medium to another. So, like, to some degree, you're fundamentally forced to make certain changes. For example, if you were doing a one-to-one translation of the Harry Potter books, the films would be, it would be like I think they said it would be like 13 films long, right? To get it all done. Like, there's just so
Sounds
much
about right.
story they had to cut, right? And so I just don't,
But
I don't
here's
care.
a better
I don't
example.
care.
Here's a better example then. So this is one that a lot of people, a lot of racist people have issues with. When you take one character of a race and change it to another character of a different race, that is to some people a fundamental different change. Are we going to acknowledge that this is kind of a similar argument to that, or are we not?
Think that I personally think that, like, for the most part, like, race swapping or gender swapping characters, I'm fine with that as long as it doesn't break the original intent of the actual story. So, for as a really obscure example, if anybody read Artemis Fowl when they were kids, um probably no one. The whole point of the elf character is that she's the first female police elf. And when they adapted those books into the movie, the really shitty movie that nobody remembers, they turned the commander into a woman, which is ordinarily not a big deal, but like there's a whole section of the plot that just revolves around the sexism that this one first female police officer gets, and it just like completely like destroys it to have a female commander. So I think that it really depends on what kind of an adaptation they're making.
I also think that we have to fundamentally look at these works and when they were created. So the most common place I hear this argument is with like superhero films, right? When they either like the Taskmaster argument, they made Taskmaster a female. It was the worst choice they could have possibly made, right? When we look at when these works were published in the 50s and the 60s and when these characters were written to, this is the audience the comic book authors were writing to commercially. Okay. And this is also the audience that they were writing to socially. There were white audiences. So all of the heroes were white. In today's world, that is not what we're seeing. Representation is super, super fucking important. And I don't think that these are quite the same thing. I understand that you're saying, I think what you were asking is like, do we acknowledge that there's a similarity? And I do think there is a similarity, but I don't think it's a substantive enough one where I would say that I have to, like, if I agree with one, I have to agree with the other. I think I can hold both opinions.
I think that's fair. I just was making sure, like, because it's
No,
an elephant in the room. Nobody.
Absolutely, a totally similar argument. I think that if we were talking again, so about the African pygmy change, I'm totally cool with that change. I think that there are certain changes that should be made. I think that the problem that people have and that I have with this is that these changes are fundamentally minor in such a manner that they are indeed a marketing ploy and they could indeed be successful, and yet they do alter Dahl's original intent. As Ice Beans mentioned, he highlights these flourishes, these insults, these extra flares.
I have a question. Double Shine, you mentioned
Sure.
earlier. I have two questions, one for you, one for Shark, and then we'll just kind of move on and continue with the discussion. So you mentioned that this change, right? This African pygmy change, right? That was good. Everyone should agree with that and things like that. I don't know if I do. And my question is, what do you think is the difference between that change? And you said you would be against removing the slurs and racial epithets from Huckleberry Finn. So is it just the reading level that's the difference here, or is there another substantive difference between why you're okay with one change but you would be against the other?
Yeah, to me, I think it really is a matter of like reading level. I think that there's actually a really cool discussion to be had in the UK about having, immigrants coming in and working in these factories. Grandpa Joe in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was fired at the factory and replaced with an immigrant worker. Now, that's a really, really cool discussion to be had, but goddamn conservatives will be jumping on the CRT train if we start talking about that in pre-K. And I think if you compare that to like Huckleberry Finn or, again, other works in the American canon, such as To Kill a Mockingbird, the racial epithets that are used there are very, very important to the entire plot of the story. And also, I think you can start exploring those once you're a little bit older. I don't know if I would be comfortable giving, a book with American pygmies working at a factory to like a 6-year-old. That seems a little
Okay, what do
absurd
you
to
think
me.
they're going to take from it? Do you think they will even understand the issues involved?
They might not, but I think seeing
Hmm.
black people working as slaves without any like guidance there, I think that's a little weird to me.
Fair enough.
I would feel
Also,
Yeah, and
similarly about
also,
like
oh wait,
Charlie was supposed to be black,
all right,
so
Noted.
True.
that's
Sure. Go
okay.
ahead.
I it,
I have
I,
a question for you, but I want you to get into the discussion first. So go ahead.
Sure. I think I'm not sure if it's necessarily a reading level. It's more like how and why. And I think the how and why and that comes in for why these things happen and if they happen at all and should things be kept or should things be changed depends on what the reason for kids reading these books and what we want to get kids to like take away from these books actually means, right? So when it comes to Huckleberry Finn, the racism in Huckleberry Finn is important because we're talking about because when these books, at least when I was going over these books, the racism was actually important for talking about this time and when things were written and what that means and to get like a little glimpse into history. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is not real. There is no magical chocolate factory. And and the thing is when we give kids these books, I care less about the historical accuracy of Oompa Loompa singing songs while you get trapped in chocolate pipes. I think what's more important is is that it's good. I agree. What's your name in the middle? Para? I think I agree a little bit that like Doll was talking to a different audience. And that's why the books are slightly different. When the racism was happening or the anti-Semitism or like any of these things were going on, that's what kids were just going to see. They don't do that's we don't live in the same world. And there are honestly quite small changes for how big a difference between 1950 and 2023 is. I think when it comes to these books, these little children books, there's no reason to feel the need to like return to the past and have some traditional outlook. There's no reason. They're like little kids reading about a magic chocolate factory and not talking about how racism affects like the history of this artist and this like author in the time where he grew up in American society and like how it's just not important. So that's why it's so fundamentally different. They're just barely even honestly not even comparable at all.
Sure.
Okay, so
I understand.
because you
Oh.
brought my name up. He mentioned me, if I may.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Would you then say that like so certain schools are banning To Kill a Mockingbird? How do you just broad spectrum? How do you feel about that?
I mean, it honestly depends on for why they're banning it and what they're supplementing it with and what's going on there. I think I would be against banning To Kill a Mockingbird if you're not supplementing it with like something else that would be like appropriate for that age range to talk about incredibly like similar or the same issues, right? There's some schools that probably didn't read To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not sure if they had a better or worse education than me on racism when I was growing up or have better or worse like values on race than me. I just don't know. I don't know what that curriculum is. Like these books, these specific books that every or almost every kid reads, they're there for a specific reason and you're going over them in history or in literature or in English class for a specific reason to talk about specific things, and you don't just read Huckleberry Finn and they don't have you say the N-word while you're sitting in the Socratic circle just for fun. They do it to understand a glimpse into the past, and that's what these like 9th, 10th, 12th grade kids are doing, and not like reading about a magical Chocolate
I
Factory.
read
So
Huckleberry
that's
Finn way
okay.
why I
earlier.
asked the question specifically is because I feel like if you're, you brought up Huckleberry Finn, I
Wait,
feel like
just real quick. How old were you guys when you were introduced to Huckleberry Finn in like school? Like I read it in elementary school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
like
really
Right,
ninth,
it was
10th
really
grade.
young. It wasn't ninth grade.
really young.
It
But
wasn't
old are you again?
required.
Wait, how old are
To
you?
Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, I'm
is like
39 years old. So I'm
Okay,
pretty-
yeah, but like, what, black
Yeah, I'm
people had
35.
rights for like 20 years when you were reading that? I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the reason why I had it read to me when I was, or not read to
You
me
know,
when I read it
You
when I
just
was
grew up in a different
elementary
generation
school,
with
though.
like different values, and I think that's
Sure.
why you read it like later, and then some things get moved up, and now we have like younger things for younger kids that can
So
give
this
the
was
same
Are you-
values but are just different things.
So this was actually something I had thought of, Shark Zero. What would you feel about instead of like altering these works, just adjusting the age range we target them at, right? Like, because then you could still have these fantastical works that children could read, and instead of maybe at 5 or 6, read them at maybe 8 or 9, and be able to have a small discussion about it. Because that was kind of the thought I had, was we don't need to alter the works so much as alter the way we're trying to target them, which is where it leads me back to the capitalist argument that it's really frustrating that it seems like the only reason for alterization is to make a profit when we could actually make a change that would be substantive and allow the work to stand in its original form.
If profit was never about this, he would have like Roald Dahl or whatever would have given the rights to his book to like a non-profit organization to post like the books or something, or like go to a charity and have all of that go through that way. It was always about money. Like I would imagine that he enjoyed being an author and not working in a coal mine, so he continued writing books, not simply just because I love writing kids books and I love writing books. He's like, I love making money, and I'm making money and doing something I love. The estate did it because they get to make money off of like somebody who because like it's just like what parents do. They live a good life so you could live a better life, so they're benefiting off that better life, and then they sold it to somebody else who's just like, who cares about honestly the money. And that's, I mean, like, if we're gonna have an argument about whether or not capitalism is bad when it comes to the arts, like, I mean, we can have that argument. I don't think we're here for that, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah,
But like,
We're not.
I don't think that's
yes,
clear.
but
That's the most
wait,
boring
I'm
argument, in my
gonna
opinion.
answer your question. You're going to have to get me on board from this should happen to I don't care if it happens, all the way to it shouldn't happen. I can agree with you that moving these books up in the age range for like when kids would more likely to be like just introduced to them, sure, fine. But even if you move me to the I don't care range, these books would still be getting edited and remade, and like nothing really changes. Which
I want to
fine.
Okay,
give space
so-
to Ice to respond, and then I still have my question, but I'm holding it off. So go ahead.
Okay, so here's my thing, right? I like, first of all, I don't think that I don't think that the problematic views in Dahl's books are limited to fucking racism. It's more than that, right? Again, like I said, it's a fucking feature, not a bug. So I think that I don't think you can equate it. You can't hold it up against like Huckleberry Finn and say, oh yeah, okay, let's only read the Huckleberry Finn. Let's only keep the unedited version of Huckleberry Finn in the classroom. I just think that I'm not even saying that we shouldn't do it. I just think that we should focus more on the ways that we already utilize to bring awareness to those problematic elements. You have teachers, you have readers themselves figuring it out later. You have book clubs, you have forewords, you have forums, you have fucking book talk. Okay? Like how many people like grew up and realized that like Cho Chang was actually a pretty problematic name for
Right.
the one of the only Asian characters in Harry Potter, but no one's going to like I'm not going to argue that like even if J.K. Rowling gives up the rights and like signs off her blessing on somebody changing it, I wouldn't agree with somebody rewriting it to renaming Cho Chang. I just think that we can have that discussion outside of the classroom or in the classroom, like when people are reading the books. If it's a problem, if it's something that they think is particularly important, like they want to kind of mitigate the anti-fatness in a book, then they can have a conversation with their child about it. Or maybe the person will like pick up on those problematic values, try to bring it into a book for them, and just like get blasted out for like their fat phobic views. I just think
but
that
all the
we
suggestions
Yeah.
you're giving are on the consumer side, and I don't think that's really relevant here. Whatever the consumer wants to do is totally fine. If they want to read books from non-problematic authors, they have that right. I don't think there's been a
Right,
massive
well-
push
Can I
to
ask-
change these books.
Can I ask-
Real quick, if I can
Well,
just
that's why.
finish,
So then why
finish
would?
really
Okay.
fast.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Because-
Finish your point.
The problem is that you're all getting upset about what the production company is choosing to do and saying it's just for money. Obviously, it's for money. They're a company. They want to sell their books. They don't want their books to fall into obscurity. And if like you say, consumers are going to stop reading their books because it's problematic, and you're advising them to do that, obviously the production company has to do something to keep their books relevant because they want to keep generating revenue.
The problem I have specifically with it is that they are doing it and presenting it as if it is what was the work of the author. Like, I don't think anyone can argue here that it's going to be more
I was gonna ask
difficult
that.
to get the original work than it was before. You can't get it on digital, right? Until they publish the classic, right? Which I don't believe they've done yet. This is just creating more barriers to getting to the original. Like, I will tell
They
you
haven't
a
done
fact
either.
that I learned. The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books you read as children were not the originals. You probably didn't even know, which is what makes this so insidious. 5, 10, 20 years from now, no one will even know that there's an edited version. That will just be what it was. It will be very, very hard and very, very rare for people to get the actual original work. It is, in a very real way, the erasure of someone's voice. And that is my problem with it. But go
It's
on.
not. It's not the.
I wanted
Can I? I'll get in line.
okay, so Shark, I'm
let's
gonna
Cypher, Shark, and then Ice.
Okay, so I wanted to actually bring up the same point Wick did, so I want to piggyback off of that. So the reason why this is kind of a thing at all is because we have copyright laws in general. I don't want to make this a copyright law discussion because that's a whole different topic, but it's part of the discussion. So imagine a world where we didn't have copyright laws, but we had protection of original works, which basically means that if you're going to republish something that isn't the original work of the author, you have to say story based on author, right? Retelling of story based on whatever. Would people in this debate still have issues with doing that? Because that's part of the conversation we're also having. I don't care either way, but if they did that way, that
No,
would
if you want
eliminate some of
to,
this.
if you want to say a
Oh.
retelling of X or a modern twist on X, I think that's
Yeah,
fine,
I think
right?
that's
Like,
fine.
I don't have a
I
problem
just
with the
don't-
reboot of Total Recall, for example. The reboots of movies, don't have a problem with them. But if you have two different directors and the reboot, you do, and you claim that the original director actually directed that, then I have a problem because the original director absolutely did not direct that work.
So
That
I
is
think
the main
I'd
I-
take the same approach to that. By the way, in answer to your question, I'd take the same approach to that as I do like movie adaptations. Like, I consider them apples and oranges.
Okay, and then there's
So
the follow up to that.
Hold
Just-
on.
okay, go ahead, Parallax.
Direct answer. There's a contemporary example of this. Another way we could do this. It's just a simple fucking disclosure. So, like Wick said, the idea that we're presenting it as the work of the original author. When Disney made the few changes that they did to some of their classics library, they put disclosures in ahead of time. And yes, people were up in a tizzy, but you still got to consume the content in its original form. I think it is absolutely absurd that we can't do something so fucking simple as put a page in the front of the book that says, hey, some of this content was written at a different time. If you have any questions about what you're reading or it makes you feel uncomfortable, ask your fucking mom.
So then
Some
my
people don't
follow-up
have
question.
moms,
They don't.
Parallax.
I
Come on,
was
dude.
gonna suggest a book guide, but yes.
Yeah, I want to
That's
hear
fine
from
too.
I want to hear from Kidology, and then Shark.
Yes, I was just going to say to Parallax, that's what they have done, at least in the UK with Puffin Books, that they have put this sort of disclosure at the front of the editions that are going to be published. So they are doing that
With
It's
the
not
original
really a-
editions or with the edited editions?
with the
With the
edited
new ones.
ones.
Yeah, so that kind of sucks. I'd rather them publish the original edition and be like, yo, this shit was written at a different time.
Yeah.
They're publishing
yes,
both though,
yes.
right? Kidology at this point, they're going to be doing parallel.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I think because of the backlash and because the Queen Consort has now gotten involved as well. And I think that's just gotten
Wait, the
everybody.
Queen Consort got involved? I did not know that.
Yes, she made
Oh,
quite
snap.
a passionate speech, and I think she has inadvertently blocked the plans, at least, or stalled the plans that
Well,
Puffin Books
shit.
has.
Am I a
Damn.
Am I a monarchist now?
Damn.
Am I a
I
monarchist
think we
now? I
are.
don't
No,
know.
this is-
Charlie,
Yes.
Charlie got cucked. The king,
be
not
fair,
the
the-
one in the factory.
The prime minister also spoke out against it. Okay, so we can
course he
say
did.
we can still very. The government is
Fair,
awesome.
fair,
All right.
Anyway, I want to get Shark Zero in on this. Shark Zero's been trying to get in, so go ahead.
Sure, I don't know. It just seems weird that because what it seems like at the end of the day is that we would basically be forcing somebody to print books that they don't want to print anymore, or that books that they don't agree with anymore. Like literally forcing a company to continue to keep printing books
Why?
that they
Why
don't
are they
want to print.
forced?
What do you?
No, why are they forced? Like, who is forcing them to print these books?
Wait, the force would be. We were saying that they can't edit these books. We should be able. They shouldn't be. It's morally wrong for them to edit these books, so they should
And
keep printing.
present them as the original words of the author. Those are the
Wait,
two things.
I think there's two
did
separate
these
arguments. But
Yeah, these are two separate arguments. But did they ever say these books were untouched or something? What are you talking about?
Who is going to, like, again? My
Wait, didn't they?
think
Didn't they come out publicly and say we're editing these books? We're working with somebody else to edit these books. Didn't they say that publicly themselves?
Sure, but again, in 5-10 years, when people buy these books in the digital market, it's going to read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, right? And no one's going to remember what people said 10-20 years ago about how they were editing the books. That's the problem.
I don't know if that's even. I have no clue if that's true. We're imagining.
That happened with Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. I just gave you an example.
We're imagining the story, and at this moment in time, they're still pumping. Have they even started actually printing these new books yet?
not yet.
Are they even on shelves yet?
I don't know.
We're just imagining something that's happening while they're still coming out, while
marketplace.
they're still talking about the plan that they're making. We're like putting up creatures and then laying on the ground and getting mad at them.
But again,
and getting scared
no,
at them.
you're,
But
like,
then it's not the
no,
only
just
example, right?
Just real quick. No, you're factually wrong because they have done this update to the digital bookshelf, right? You're only thinking about hard copy here, but in the digital marketplace, they absolutely have already done that. They've already updated it on Amazon Kindle and
they told you
replaced
that the
all
book
the
is.
old books.
They told you that the book is updated.
I think
Again,
what
but-
Wiki.
oh,
Well, I think
okay.
what
They told
Wiki
you the book is
what Wiki
updated.
But how
Okay.
You
many-
know the
how
book
many
is
edits-
updated.
how
Why
many
are
times
you
has the
why are
book
you
been-
confused?
Shark Zero.
Shark.
How many books have you read that were edited that you never fucking knew?
How many books are edited?
You don't
every
know.
every
You
book is
don't
edited.
know.
Every
That's
every
the
book is
answer.
edited. Every single book is edited.
No,
When
no,
you
no.
come to a
Edited-
script to a
edited
publisher,
post-publication.
they change
No,
it.
come on, you know what I mean. Edited post-publication, not before it goes to publication.
Post publication.
Of course,
Honestly,
it's fucking
probably
edited.
probably all of them. If I'm
Yes,
getting like
but
a
I
new
think-
if I'm getting a newly printed book, I would assume that this is not probably not the original book that came out. You should
Okay,
probably
but I think what
imagine
I
that.
think
Not the
I think
case.
what I think
How?
what we
From
mean.
that world.
Hold on.
The
I
words should
think
be the
what we
same.
mean is like it. Okay, listen. I think what we mean is like if you read a book that had already been out for 10 years, right? How would you know that they didn't edit that book like 5 years in to make it more inclusive or more like
I could
you know,
do
sensitive?
something. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty new. It's called Googling. I was like, if I actually care about whether the book was edited or not, I could like Google, has this book been updated? Has this book been republished?
You
And
should
then
be
I could-
fair,
and I
most-
can look it up.
Also,
It's
no,
it's
I'm
super
pretty
most
sure
easy
people
to
aren't
do
going to do
figure out
that.
if it's
Oh.
actually been
People
republished.
are not gonna do that.
Okay, that's
pretty
their
sure on, like,
fault.
the
That's
first
not the
page.
publisher's
Hold
fault. You
on.
don't care if the book is edited, and if you don't care if the book is edited, why are we talking about you should care about the book being edited then?
Hey, who cares if men and women get paid the same? The women aren't asking. The women aren't going to ask for raise. Who gives a shit?
What are you
right? Like,
talking
it's not-
about?
This isn't a moral
See if
thing.
he's got-
What the fuck, right? Like, what is this argument? What is this,
This
argument?
this
here?
is illogical. The barriers to women being paid less than men are very
Have these been
clear,
edited?
and are not simply because they just didn't ask for more money.
And it's better that they are clear. It's better than they're clear because we recognize the problem and can actually address it and tackle it. The problem with this is it's so insidious is because no one recognizes it. No one knows about it. Most normies don't
What do you
know
mean
these
nobody
things
knows
are
about it?
happening, right?
This is all over.
fucking
Well,
argument.
no, nobody knows about it. Everybody's talking about this.
But
I think
I'm pretty sure
it's
it's
on,
on
like,
like
it's
the
on
first
your
page.
TV.
that-
It's on TV.
Hold on.
It's on news. There are debates. Before
Sure.
this, I looked at like 3 debates about this with like 300,000 views. How do you mean nobody knows?
Man, I wish I got
I think
About-
I think
that'd be fine.
I gotta,
Go ahead,
About
Zach.
this
I gotta
particular-
go, I gotta
yeah,
go Google
about-
and see if the book I read last week was edited. I'll be right back.
And if you didn't care, then why should I? If you actually don't care about the book
shouldn't
being edited, why should
have to
I?
do it. You shouldn't have to do it. That's such a stupid fucking argument. Why should I have to read a work and go, let me make
Okay,
sure
so-
the author
so-
Wait, why would you
intent wasn't
care?
fucked with.
Why would
Do
the
we-
average
do we-
person care?
Fucking thing.
there's
Cypher.
there's
Doesn't matter.
myriad different kind of strains of debate going on in this, and I just made a pun of it against. Like, anyways, what's kind of going on is that there's some people that are taking the idea of the death of the author, subconsciously, and applying it to whether or not it matters if the edits are changed, and other people want to have the original work as the author originally intended. So if this brings up another question, though, say in 20 years, every single book that we're talking about right now falls out of print. And then in another 100 years, you can't find that book at all anymore. Is there any reason to care about that as well? And if not, then how come we care about the edits being made to keep the book alive in the first place?
Old things hard to find anymore. New things very abundant. It's them. They're destroying our culture.
So
I guess I don't
go ahead.
understand your question. Maybe Cypher, could you rephrase it or
Yeah,
say
so-
it again? Just
So
in
some of the stuff that's being done is clearly being done for money. It's copyright. We want to keep publishing the books, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, a book falls out of favor, okay,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, and the publishers choose to not publish anymore because it's not going to make money. So we can theoretically see 200 years from now that a book will simply cease to exist. There might be like a couple of copies here and there, but by and large, the vast majority of people don't understand that the book still exists.
Right.
If we care about maintaining the author's work in its totality, then if these books are being published in different ways with different sayings in them in order to keep the book alive and published and keep it being done, how are we going to
So
care
here's
about
the
it being
answer to your
changed
question.
or it being, while at the same time not caring if it
So one of
falls
the
out of print
solutions,
entirely?
because this is a problem that has been way before, like recognized way before. They used to do reprints and things all the time to kind of make sure that there were new copies in the world of various books that were popular. I think digitization has been the way forward to preserve these works because it lasts pretty much forever, which again makes this kind of thing much easier to do. It's very easy to edit the preserved digitized work. And again, unless you are specifically going for it, they told us that they were going to do it this time, right? And we can all see how this could be used in a very problematic way, where they just don't tell you and they just do it, right? They said, you know what? We don't want this to happen. We're going to just make these changes. So I guess I'll ask to those of you who are defending this change, right? Say you 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, you become famous. Someone wants to make a kind of like a biography of your life. You are that high up. You've succeeded. You've become top streamer, right? And they want to make a biopic, right? A biographical work based on you. So they take all your tweets and they were like, oh man, some of these tweets, we're going to have to edit them. So instead of bangers, like, I don't know how I could function with so low of an IQ, they change it to like, wow, this guy was being a real big dummy head. Like
You already
it
changed
edits
it.
your
I
work.
specifically said I don't know how I would cope if I had such a low IQ.
Fair enough. See, I'm editing it right now on the fly. But they make these changes to the sensitivity of things. I can't speak for any of you, but I would feel violated. I made those problematic tweets for a reason, and God damn it, I want them to exist. I want them out there, and I want to be able to go and deal with those takes as is.
This is completely illogical, because once again, like I said, the magical chocolate factory is not real, but in other works, those things are real. If you're doing a biography that's supposed to be something like a written documentary about somebody, then it would simply just be lying if you said that they said something that they didn't. If you, instead of direct quoting them, you said, this person brutally insulted their intelligence, that would be true. And you wouldn't be saying exactly what I said if you don't want to necessarily repeat it. These are completely different things. The chocolate factory is not real. The tweets were.
Yeah, but
but
Roald
allegory is
Dahl
important.
was,
But
real
yeah,
quick,
like,
Roald Dahl
again,
was
like-
real. And if he
No.
put his work and said, I wrote this, which is authored by Roald Dahl, that's what that means. I wrote this, and then you change what he actually wrote, that's a problem.
Wait a second.
Right? That's
So
also
do you,
lying.
Wait, do you disagree with like editors when books are originally getting published, sending a book back and saying you're not going to say that, or we're not going to publish
No, because
this?
the author at that point still has the ability to say, well, I don't agree with this change that you're making. I'm going to break contract and not allow you to publish.
Okay, so what about like their children, and they want to republish the book and they go to another publisher and they're their estate and they.
No, I have problems with that when children make those kinds of decisions. I think that's a copyright debate,
Yeah.
right? But I do have.
But
No,
It
like
seems like
morally,
that's like
what's
your
the
whole
problem
problem.
with
Your
it?
whole problem is one about copyright. You basically think that once an author's dead, that's it. It's just gone. You can't touch any of their work, which is absolutely not the case. Roald Dahl
and
You can
also-
do
sold
like
his
And also
copyright
the
reimagining.
laws.
problem,
Like,
the
I'm not saying
problem
you
that you
can't touch
have
his
is not
works.
the problem that you have is not that no, these books are they're like the Netflix company has started to pay off cops to like kick down my door and steal the Roald Dahl books out of my kids' library at home, and now we can't have them anymore. Your problem is that they're just new, and then the old ones they're not printing anymore. So actually, my bad. I'm not even gonna buy into that lie. They're still printing, but they're slightly harder to find now because the new ones are going to be more abundant. That's your problem.
Also, the
Okay,
idea of
I have
digital erasure is crazy to me because I think I found a PDF file of every single.
Yes, I
Roald
also
Dahl
found a
book ever
PDF file of the
printed. Like,
original
it's
publish
You
of
understand
Okay,
how
Charlie and the
okay,
it's
Chocolate
hold on.
like
Factory.
this is
It's
such a weird.
completely
Okay,
free.
go on, Ice
Okay.
Beans. But this is
Hold on.
absolutely such a. You would never say
Here
this
it
for
is.
any other
It's
problem people
completely
would have.
free
Oh, you have
online.
problem getting a job? Oh, just get a new job. It's easy, right? Like, no, there's barriers to entry here. There are extra barriers being put up that makes it much harder
And internet
to find
access,
these
the barrier
original
of
works.
entry.
Right. But
Okay, I have a question for the panel in general, but also like I guess specifically for defenders or people who don't care about this. Why is it important that the source material is changed? Like, why does the change have to come from the actual book that you're reading? Why can't it come from, like you said, like you called it, like the consumer side of things? Why does it have to come from the source material?
We're not
because
arguing
consumers will
about
just
like a
stop reading it.
yeah. We're not arguing about it like a have to. We're not saying that these books is the most important. I'm not like I went to Walmart today. I didn't go pick up like a rifle, and I'm not going to go to like Netflix HQ because the books need to be changed, and I'm going to hold them at gunpoint because they need to be changed. It's not about a need to. It's fine.
And
It's
do you
okay.
agree? Would you agree then that changing the source material is like would you agree with what I'm saying in that
I feel like
changing
you're
the
gonna
source
ask for like a
material
crazy
isn't
jump. But go ahead.
well, I just don't think it's the best method of achieving whatever they're trying to achieve,
Okay,
right?
but like even if I were to concede that it may not be the best method, I saw some of the edits. I don't think all of them were necessarily the world's greatest, biggest brain edits ever. There was like one book I think they were talking about witches and how they could be hiding among us or something. I don't know. But like they changed it from they could be a cashier or a waiter to a top scientist or like a politician or something. And
Yeah, no,
that's,
and I think-
but like
yeah.
it's like I have a little bit of a problem with that because like a lot of writers don't know how to write women, and so they get scared of having women have any flaws whatsoever. So like them being a waiter is somehow like worse than them being right. But that's like another issue. But also it could be like, oh, they could be anywhere, and they could even be or they can even be making like drastic changes to your life outside of just like ringing up your the quinoa that you bought at the grain aisle, right? Like
No,
it's
no, no.
it's okay that it
Yeah.
can be like it's okay that it may not be perfect, and the editors know there's no editor that's perfect, but it's fine. It's okay.
Okay, so here's like okay, so here's what I was thinking because I like again I went back and I read like the first half of the witches to essentially like read it in context. I went through like I was staring at this fucking list for like 4 days. And I like as I started looking at them I realized that I was like kind of rating them. Like some of the changes I was like, okay, this is like probably justifiable, right? Like the cashier stuff, like instead of it now she could be a CEO instead of like a fucking clerk, right? There were some changes that were like, okay, fine, I see why you did it. Some of them were like, you could have probably left that alone. And then some of them were just like, why? You have like gone backwards in your like line of thinking here. And I think that for me, the reason that I say that it matters is the parts where it's like you've gone backwards. And that's kind of what makes me want to throw all of it out because you've now just like it is the parts that matter that like try to whitewash like the Oompa Loompas or try to take out the fat parts or try to take out like the misogynic parts of the witches. When you read the witches and you realize it's all an indictment on like bad women, like the whole thing is about women with cat claws who like wear wigs and steal children for money. So
And honestly, that
I
could
guess,
be more impactful since they're top
moreover-
scientists or like politicians or something instead of just waitress and whatever.
See,
but like basically
but I
what you
don't
said
care.
to me,
I don't care about those. Though.
okay, but
see,
like,
this
but
is the thing.
also
I
what
don't
you
care
said
about
to me
those
was
edits.
literally we need to throw
Moreover,
away
these-
editing all of these books because sometimes the edits are bad, and I just can't agree with that.
I just think that like the push that they've made has like essentially not like they've just taken this what it looks like to me is they've said, oh, okay, we're gonna remove misogynistic things, we're gonna remove racist things, we're gonna remove fat
Are
things.
you sure
and
they
they've
really
applied
wanted
it
to? Are you sure they really wanted to remove all references to any problematic view, or they just wanted to make them a little bit more palatable to children? Which one? Which one do you think it was?
No, I think that they tried their best to do a lot of them. They don't take out all of the references, but I think that's
so
what
it's probably
makes it
about
worse.
they just want to make it a little bit. Wait, but then that's an argument. Then I'm not sure if you understand, but you're already on my side because we're not arguing whether or not these edits should or shouldn't happen. We're talking about we're arguing about good and bad edits. I'm not going to sit here and defend bad edits if the edits are bad, but I'm not against editing just period.
I don't think anyone's
so then I
against
guess
editing.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. This isn't like we're not talking about a book that's like this isn't like a book like fucking Count of Monte Cristo that was rewritten as a summary to make sense to small children, right? This isn't like Three Musketeers rewritten for small children. This is a book that's already written for children that's just taken some naughty words out to make it more palatable, regardless of how well it did it.
Okay, that sounds perfectly
for me,
fine. And I know, you know what? I'm also gonna wait. I'm also gonna
wait. Let him finish. You're gonna go next, Parallax. I promise.
I'll let you go. It's gonna be quick. Okay, then here. I agree with good edits, and I disagree with bad edits. And I think they should make good edits, but they should not make bad ones, because the bad ones are bad, and the good ones are very good. And I think that would be better than making bad edits than good edits, because the book would be better than when they were bad, and now they're good instead of bad, or at least better.
I mean, I agree with that. I'm not gonna argue with that, honestly.
I'll do you one better. I'm okay with the edits as long as they do not put it under the original author's name and they say this is the edited version, this is the retolling, this is the reimagining. I'm fine with that. But when you again say Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, it better fucking be his words. That's all I gotta say. Anyway, Parallax been wanting to go, and Parallax is gonna explode if he doesn't, and I don't want him to explode.
I think I've already exploded, guys. I'm trying to re-implode. I'm working on it. I'm 140 now. No, I think that it speaks the biggest issue with it for me too is that it speaks to a lack of creativity. We are looking at going back and we are so shit tier at creating new stories and new experiences for children that we have to go back and sanitize works that were written that long ago when frankly we could you can fucking wait.
I'm waiting. I'm gonna. Ooh, you got me heated. I'm just kidding.
You go ahead. You stay heated. You cook. There is absolutely ridiculous that we are going back in time and we're justifying this under the guise of like needing to modernize these works. Just write modern fucking works. J.K. Rowling did it. Try it better. Do better, creative people.
How is Roald Dahl gonna write new books? He's dead. I don't understand that argument.
I think that the fucking book if you like the edits. You write books.
Finish, Parallax. Once you're finished, I know Cypher, and then I want to hear from Kidology again because
everybody who's okay with the edits, you write the fucking books.
Also, incredible thing. This is for you, chat. So here's at the beginning.
So I'm gonna have to push back on this one pretty hard because I don't.
So here's the beginning. This is page 13 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and as you can see here, they talk about when it was published and the different publishing. This edition is reissued in 2010. It's literally right here in the beginning of the book.
Doesn't fucking matter. Point is that there's stuff that is being created all the time that doesn't get published for whatever reason. And all that this is we're seeing a group of people that are milking an intellectual property for everything that it's worth in order to make money. That's where the laziness comes from. That is where the laziness comes from. They're trying to revive an old intellectual property in order to continue to make money off of it. This has nothing to do with the fact that modern generations can't create things. Look at any of the indie comic book scenes. Look at any of the indie video game scenes. These are all people that are in their early 20s to mid 30s making extremely good works of art in various different mediums.
I think reissued wouldn't be strong enough if you don't know what the word reissued means, if I'm going to be honest. And once again, like a child might not, but also a child doesn't care about whether they're reading the original work.
This is for both Kidology and Shark. I am curious. If you published a work or some sort of article or speech or what have you, Which would you rather have happen? Them edit it to say things that you didn't actually want them to say, or to have your book burned? Which would you prefer?
If I'm going to be completely honest, that's an incredibly hollow question because I have no clue
Why?
what that would possibly. Well, I'm not calling you dumb, just so you know. I'm just saying that like
It's okay to call me
I'm
dumb.
not
People have
sure
done it before. They'll
what
do
that
it
would
again.
mean. Because if I meant something stronger than what was then it was re-edited to, then I may not have that big of an issue if it's better. If it's sometime in the future.
No,
and I
to
call
be
someone,
clear, the edit is something that you absolutely did not mean and would never espouse. So instead of
I would
say
never
they edited your
espouse?
Substack to confess to a crime, that you were confessing to when you were young to killing someone, and
Okay,
that's
but
what they edited
at
it
that
to.
point, that's defamatory. That's defamatory towards me, and it's actually just trying to make me look worse. These edits literally are supposed to make him look better, and do, to your average person. Oh, and also, what you were asking for is also already done. I've been showing my chat, but I can send it to you if you want. I pulled up the free version of
Send it in your
Charlie and the
chat.
Chocolate Factory PDF that was issued. That's a new republishing of the book. And on page 13, on the literally at the beginning of the book, those pages that you always skip because nobody cares about what they say. They talk about, they
the
say
ones
every
you
single
already skipped and
time,
no one's going to read.
they say every single time the book was edited, when it was first published, when it was published by different works, when it was reissued, and it said this edition was reissued in 2010. What you're asking for already exists.
A reissue? You were saying that that's enough to let people know that it's edited? What?
It was reissued.
Yeah.
Hold on, but I think
need to
there's
put
a hold on.
sticker.
Wait a second.
Reissue?
Can
I
I
disagree
You
with
know
what
what
you are.
reissue
Can I-
is? It could simply
Quite-
mean republication. What are you
Quite-
talking about?
Quite
Okay.
literally what Wick asked for.
All right. No, you know what? Never
Shark
mind.
Hero
Okay, but
gave it to him and
I-
he
No,
said,
never mind.
no!
You're right. So true.
No,
Okay, but can
the
I-
reissue in 2010. Reissue in 2010 can mean all sorts of different things, right? No changes were made. They just updated the cover art, right? We don't know.
Yeah, can you be more
Right?
clear
Yeah.
what it says? Is it?
Do
does it
you wait?
specify
You
if
need
edits were
a
made?
wait,
No, no,
wait,
does
wait,
it- does it
wait.
specify
In
if
every
edits were
edited
made?
book,
Just that.
you need like 50 pages at the back that show every single edit. You need like every book should be double the
No.
size because it
No,
should
does-
it
does it
should
just
show
show that
every
it was
edit that you
edited?
ever edited in the book
All
at the
Wick
back of
is-
the book. Oh my
Does
bad,
it
the front of the
just
book.
say it
Because if
was?
you read the entire book, then you get to the end, you're like, oh my goodness, I had no clue that this was here. This is ridiculous.
Does
Shark,
it
I love you,
say
buddy, but there's-
that it was. That's all he wants to know. Does it say like
There-
it was edited at this date? It was edited at this date.
I don't even think it matters for that much. So what
me look.
the issue seems to be is that we have a person being ascribed to work that isn't entirely their own, right? We can talk about editors in general when the person is still alive. They're making the claim that they go back and forth and they agree to edits. That's different. What Wick is basically saying is that he wants original work by X author, edits in current version by Y. Am I wrong, Wick?
That's fine, right?
All right. So
Yeah,
I don't
I'd
think
be
I don't
fine
think
with that.
what you brought up, Shark, is actually what people are wanting.
Okay.
I think like almost
I
every
think-
single book has some like page at the beginning that says like the company that edited it. It shows the version, the year. Now you can be upset
but
that there's no big sticker on the front that says like edited by a different company, but it's just not true. There's no way that you
Just
can
shows
just
publication.
completely.
But hold on a
It just
second.
shows
Can we
you cannot
just
sell a new book without putting in the fine print that there's been some edits and that's by a different person.
Okay, but
They
I
don't
think
do that.
They absolutely do. You're just wrong here.
It just says public. No, I'm not. I've got several books right here. They just say the different publication dates. It doesn't say it was edited.
Yep. I'm looking at it right
And-
now. You're just
okay.
And-
Also,
and
can we
what
just
Wick-
yeah? Go ahead, Cypher.
I was going to say what Wick is asking for is essentially, and what other people are asking for is essentially saying the original work was done by X. The edits, some of the edits in this book are not that author's edits. They are editor Y, basically. If it's going to be a change of context and everything like that, if the author didn't themselves agree to the edits being published, then it is no longer their entire work, and then that should be called out somewhere. And I think Wick would probably go as far as to say, like, if it is a retelling, or in this case, we're talking about a sensitivity reader, that should be sensitivity reading changes by Y, original work by X.
Yep.
I
And
think that-
I'm
okay, see,
currently
that's what-
looking at the book I am holding. It says copyright 2002, 2007. It does not show any notification of whether or not there was an edit between its original publishing date in 2002 and its second publishing date in 2007.
What book are you?
I have
What
no
book are
clue
you
if I'm
looking
holding
at?
the same book.
What book is that?
This is Christopher Moore's Lamb, the Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Pal.
okay.
Okay, can I just say also that we're talking
It's a
about
fucking
editorial.
hilarious book.
We're talking about like.
I'll send it to you, Shark. You're not gonna remember that.
Can I also just say that we're talking? Me too. Also, Parallax. That sounds
Yeah,
funny.
it's so good.
I think that we're talking about like editorial changes, and like some of these editorial changes might be like, oh, there was like an extra a comma in like fucking page 57, like, and that's like a far cry from like sensitivity changes, right? So is there? I guess my question is there a distinction between those types of edits
I think there should
on
be.
pages on like these?
Yeah, I think if you wanted to like include, so for example, in the new versions of the book, I think the Roald Dahl company, they partnered with like, I think it's called Inclusivity
Inclusive
Minds or
minds,
something.
yeah.
So
Inclusive
I think if
minds.
you wanted to have like a little fine print that says like edited by Inclusivity Minds, that would be awesome. I totally respect that. In fact, I think it should be required for
Right.
both Inclusivity Minds and for
And
the
then we're
public awareness.
closer than you think on this.
Yeah, I know, but I'm pretty sure that like I would be honestly, I'd be shocked that that's not already included somewhere in the fine print.
Yeah.
It just feels like you kind of want like a giant sticker on the front that says that
So,
it's been edited.
yeah.
But see, I
for-
think
It all-
you know what's
I do
funny
want it-
though.
I do want it to be more clear, right? Than just like the copyright things that we. But that's just I could live with it just being right, like in the.
Well, I want to ask, like,
copyright
why does it
section.
need? Why does it need that? Like, why is it immoral if it's not?
Because
there?
I think
Why
it's
is it
important
immoral if
to
it's a-
distinguish, right? Well, just to answer your question real quick, I think it's important to distinguish the what someone actually said versus the changes that they made. Like, I think it's very important, like, to make sure that we do not ascribe things to people that they did not actually say. And I think that matters, even in death. Like, even in death, I think this is just a normal, respectful thing. We should not put words, good or bad, in someone's mouth that they did not actually say, right? I don't want them to edit anyone's posthumously. I don't like that. I'm fundamentally against that. If they published or put out a speech or there was a video with them, that should stand as is.
Okay,
Right?
wait,
that should stand as is.
Shark,
After
Shark,
the
I have
editings are done, after all that, while they were still alive and they agreed to, it's about consent at the end of the day.
Sure.
And
Shark,
if they
I
can't,
have-
if they
have an
cannot
answer.
consent because they're dead.
Okay, Ice Beans. Sure. What's up?
Okay, so my like I guess for real world example of like an answer, right? I wouldn't want like I would want there to be a distinction because I'm just imagining like two children who read two different versions of the books and they both grow up and get on to like whatever version of TikTok that they have back then, like in the future, and they're now talking about two different books, right? And I just think that like because of the age range that these books are already like they're already meant for children, I just think it's less confusing and it's less like I don't know, it's weird to like have you ever actually like been in a position where you realized that you'd read like a sanitized version of a book when you were a kid,
That I've read
like
like
when
a
you
sentence.
realize that, like when you realize
I've never been in that position whatsoever. When
Okay,
I
'cause
read or
that-
look at when I read or look at something, I personally
Yeah.
go, what version am I looking at? And
Right.
or like if I go to look for something, I'm going to they usually are going to be like, oh, this is a new publication or something, or this is a new adaptation, or this is a new like reissuing or something along those lines. And I'm probably going to, but like the idea, you said these are two different books. Do you genuinely believe that a kid who read the 2003 issuing of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory are reading a completely different book and they couldn't talk to each other and understand what's going on over the 2023
No, I don't
reissuing?
think. I don't think. Okay, here. I think. Like, I mean, I feel like you're blowing that up a bit. I don't think that they're so fundamentally different that there's
because
not
it's
going to
something
be.
that's
There's not
important
going to
to
be a
me.
gap.
That's why I
Well,
talk about
hold
it,
on a
'cause it's important
second.
to me.
Okay, okay. I don't think that like they're not going to be able to connect with each other, right? But there is going to be that disconnect because there's going to be a perception of like this new and revamped perception of doll is less racist or less like fat phobic than like the old one, right? And I just think that it's important to keep doll as he is so that we can say, yeah, look at all the shit that he's written in his books, but also they were funny and I loved them when I was a kid.
Sure, you
That's
can
my point though.
Sure, you can
Because
see
I think that like
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I think okay. I guess I guess like another example would be like the Cho Chang one, right? Like let's say there was a version of the book out there of Harry Potter's books where like it wasn't Cho Chang, it was somebody else's. Well, some like some person is going to have a realization in the future. Oh, actually, this book was more problematic in its original intent, and I'm kind of actually behind on this knowledge because I read the new version,
Okay.
right? Like I don't
But
think it's an unbridgeable gap.
I want
just
to,
think that
are they
like
actually going to be
I
behind on knowledge, or are they going to go, oh, that's interesting? Because I think if you go,
I
oh, this name was changed from 2 last names of 2 different countries to like Cho whatever, that makes
right.
more sense. I don't think they're going to be like mind blown.
Well,
I'm reading a different book or something, or I'm reading like
well,
something completely different. You're just going to be
but
like,
I
oh,
think
that's
that
interesting. That's cool.
I think that that can extend into like just perceptions about the author too, right? Like when I was having this discussion yesterday, I was talking to my Jewish friend who never knew the shit that Dahl was saying about like Jewish people. Like he said some pretty horrific shit about
He also didn't
Jewish
write that in his
people.
books, did he? Did he write like,
No, but he
yeah,
still had those views. He still had those views,
yeah,
right?
and like even
So
his
my
estate came out to talk about it.
Yes, I understand. But that's what I'm trying to say is that that kind of perception, like, especially when you like sort of whitewash his stories a little bit, like that just adds on to the ignorance about the character,
I
right?
understand.
I guess that's
Okay.
what I mean.
But this feels
give
so unfair.
I want to give Kidology a chance to step in if she'd like. If you have nothing to say, that's fine. But if you have some thoughts here, please, floor's yours.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do have thoughts about what was just said because I think that this raises an interesting question about why these changes are actually being made in the first place. Because I don't think this has, as I said, anything to do with morality or with any kind of principled changes being made. I think I was reading a letter that Roald Dahl wrote a few days ago, and he said that he doesn't really, it's not important, the content of what he has written, as long as what he has written enthralls the child, as long as it encourages children to read. And I think the difference with these changes that are being made is that it's not there to encourage children to read. It's there to encourage them to do other things, such as to invest in all the planned video games, all the planned television series, all the planned merchandise that is going to be created around the brand of Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl is no longer an author, he's a brand. And I think that's the disappointing thing. And I think that's where there's sort of this severe disalignment right now. These changes aren't being made in order to be inclusive. They're made very lucratively. I mean, even with Inclusive Minds, I mean, we don't even know how much money was exchanged between Puffin Books and Inclusive Minds. There's no information on their website about anything, about the actual essence of the consultancy which they offer. It's all very backhanded, and I think that's the issue. That's one of the issues, at least. But yeah,
For me, wasn't Roald Dahl popular when he was alive? Wasn't his name well known? Wasn't he like a household name when he was alive? Or am I wrong there?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, he
So-
was, I think, pretty popular.
Okay, so he always was a brand when he was alive. He had a brand. When he put his name on something,
not
people
in the
were-
way, not like today. No,
I mean, maybe
not at
not
all.
because he's dead, and his works being like published by other companies, and sometimes
No, but there's a
they're being
huge
slightly edited.
difference in terms of him being a brand, as in being alive and a brand in his own right, in terms of his books being sold, relative to now, in which his books aren't selling nearly as well as they were, yet his name is just immense and there's so much value on it.
But also,
more than there was
Don't you
when he
think
was
that's
alive, I
probably
would say.
because his books have reached near universal saturation of like just especially Western countries? Like when he was publishing, they were still going out. He's dead now and has been dead for a long time. And his stuff has been edited and re-edited and reimagined and adapted. And everybody knows Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And everybody knows like some other books that he's read. And a lot of people know other books. They're selling less because you don't need to buy it anymore. I know Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I never read the book. I watched the movie when my English teacher was out, and the PE teacher had to take care of the class, and he had no clue. He was a PE teacher. He didn't know what was going on, so he rolled out the Elmo, and we watched Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He was a brand, a massive brand. I don't think to your average child reader, the brand of Roald Dahl is much different than it was before. And I'll actually say that some of these.
Yeah,
I'll actually say that some of these.
Real
I'll say
quick,
one last thing, and then you guys
everyone
can go.
stop. Shark can finish, and then
then-
I want to hear Kidology's rebuttal.
One more thing. I also believe that these edits could very easily make children more happy to read more books. If all of their books, all the little kid books that they read are not filled with just negativity or something, or if they're more enthralling now. I don't know how enthralling they are to, like, I don't know, maybe I'll read one to my little cousin someday and read them back to back, and then I'll make a little study to see like who's more enthralled by what book. If like the pygmy Africans make them more
Using
enthralled to read more than
children
the
to
other one.
experiment, I'm
Right.
down for.
But yeah,
it.
like
Let's
I
go.
just don't necessarily think that just because the edits were made doesn't mean that they're now less enthralling. There's just more money involved now because this brand is bigger.
Okay, why is he wrong, Kidology? Let's hear it.
Well, firstly, I think it's very different in terms of how generations now are engaging with literature and with books. In terms of statistics on how much children are reading, I mean, obviously, it's a lot lower than previous generations just because of everything like social media and everything. I think now publishing is considering the influence of social media and the influence of other industries and other forms of media a lot more than than even 20 odd years ago. So the engagement with literature is very different. I also think that, as I was saying, with these changes being made, these changes weren't asked for by the woke or by leftists or by people. This wasn't necessarily a conversation that was happening in any meaningful way, except probably in some niche little secondhand bookstore. These were made purposefully because it's about trying to make as much money as possible from the brand of Roald Dahl. And it is a viable option based on recent findings about Gen Z and Gen Z spending habits and what Gen Z is going to invest their money in as consumers. This is the best path forward, and this is something that is going to keep happening to literature, to films, to whatever, in order to create this perception of goodness or of some kind of utopian existence of human beings and of cultures. I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
If
I may,
Just let her finish, and then let her finish. Are you done, Kidology?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, for instance, with these sorts of things, it undermines, firstly, actual critical thinking. And it also sort of is framed or whitewashed as some kind of inclusivity, when in fact it just caricatures things like the idea of the modern woman, for instance, with the changes to the professions of the witches or what have you. I think... Yeah.
No, that's a good. So I guess I would
I'll
ask
just leave it there then.
I would ask everyone, right? Do we not think that there is potential harm in this sanitization, right? Regardless of why it's done, whether it's be for money or for good intentions and things like that. Do we not think that there is a measurable harm that might occur when we take away all the negativity and all the negative interactions in works for children? What
Wait,
do you
didn't we
think?
agree already that
100%.
all the negativity is
mentioned
not
this
gone?
earlier. So removing some of the negativity lowers the bar, right? Like if we continue to desensitize and desensitize and desensitize, we're creating more and more sensitive people. I think that's essentially what he's getting at, and I agree. And I touched on this earlier. This is something that I think is integral to seeing the evolution of society and the change in the way people perceive others and the change in the way authors write. Is if we don't leave these works in their original context, then you can't look at other children's works as they progress 20 years thereon, 50 years thereon, and see the way that other authors evolve in their language and their perceptions of other people. I think this is a really important way to illustrate that that society changes.
Okay, Double's been wanting in for a while. And
Yeah,
Double's
so
having trouble.
I had something else to say before you asked that question. I'm sorry.
Parallax, I'm giving it to Double, and you can sit
You
down and you
shithead.
can listen.
You're
Okay,
shithead.
Double, go ahead.
Yeah, so
You
I
keep
feel like we're
taking me.
like creating this huge conspiracy of like woke corporatism that like companies will promote more progressive products because it sells money. Yeah, obviously that's how all capitalism works. People want to make money. So when you make these arguments, things that like, oh, they don't actually care about inclusivity, they just want their products to sell. Of course, they want their products
do
to
be
sell. And I bet
storming.
what happened was
It
a
do be
couple years
storming
ago,
indeed.
Roald Dahl got strung for his anti-Semitic comments. So the company said, "Yo, let's go. Let's do a comprehensive review of all of his works and make sure that there's nothing else, no other weird things going on in his books, so that we can continue to be a force in the market." When Parallax talks about how like we shouldn't be reading these books anymore to make way for new stuff, that's awesome if you want to promote that to your schools and your kids. But for the company, if they want to keep selling their
Didn't say
product,
that.
they have to make changes to adapt to like a new market. Yeah.
No,
I
Shark
just think,
Zero already
but here's
touched
the
on
thing.
this. No, Shark Zero already touched on this, and it
Yeah.
actually supports Kidology's argument, which is the problem. So Shark Zero touched on this when he said that there's already near full market saturation of these books. Every school's already loaded down these books. There's multiple copies in every library. There's multiple classrooms that have them already. And so this is exactly what it is done for. And the fact that you are establishing that this already exists in such a uniform way it supports the fact that Kidology is saying the way that Roald Dahl's brand is being treated is not the same as when he was a living author. He is a completely ubiquitous name. It's a different entity altogether. It's like saying Marvel is the same entity today as they were 25 years ago. It's just not the case.
Can you explain what those differences are? Because all you're basically saying is it's just he's a bigger brand now without making any meaningful distinction between the two.
I also disagree.
There's a meaningful distinction between when the person is alive and can make the dictations on what their brand image is, and when they are not alive and that brand image has grown so large and so ubiquitous, and then you start altering that person's work. There's absolutely
As an example, wait, hold on.
Hey, I want to give
quick
space to Ice Beans. Go ahead.
No, real quick example of this was when when Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory came out, which is what a lot of us actually watched when we were kids, not the Johnny Depp version. When that came out, wasn't Roald still alive and he fucking hated it? And he said that like he didn't want any more movie adaptations of his work because he just like for some reason he just hated Gene Wilder. Like he just really hated it. So to go from that to now we're gonna make movies and shows and like it's gonna be sold to Netflix and all these things. Like I think that is that I would say that speaks to the whole like rebranding of Roald Dahl.
But then he shouldn't have sold his copyright when he died. He should have said,
No,
like,
no,
"Fuck
I'm
you
not
guys,
saying.
you can't
Hold
use
on.
my copyright
But it's still
anymore."
issue.
I'm not saying that.
Sells
I'm not saying that's illegal. By the way, I'm just saying
I'm not-
that,
I
like,
don't- no,
that's
no.
an example.
I'm
I'm
not
just saying
talking
that.
about I'm not talking about the legality here. I'm saying that
Right.
if you choose to give your brand off to somebody, they can do whatever they want with it. Even if he was alive, for example, right? So, like, if Kidology decided to, like, sell her YouTube channel to a neo-Nazi and they start promoting, like, Nazi content, I don't actually know if you where you're at, but if they started doing that, Kidology can't then get upset and start saying like, "Hey, I don't want you using my brand for that." If you've already sold the rights to your brand off, they can do whatever they want with it.
If she didn't know that she was selling to a neo-Nazi, I think it's perfectly reasonable that she can get upset.
She can't. She can get upset, but she can't do shit about it. They can do whatever they want.
You could also
but
put
I
it in
do,
your-
I do agree that.
about deceiving who you're buying from and buying.
Hold on. Also, I think I do agree that like but I know he didn't like he probably didn't have a clause that says no more movies ever, or maybe he did. I don't know. I'll have to go check after this because I think he was pretty pissed about that Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory thing. But I don't know if he understood the scope of what he would have been selling off. I just you know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, when he
Like-
died, I mean, there's no conception of Netflix. There's no conception of in 100 years' time what the potential sort of market around one's brand could be. So how are you meant to make a clause? How are you meant to actually regulate that for when you die?
Or like
You wouldn't stand by this with legislation. For example, you would not stand by that the Second Amendment accounted for automatic rifles today. You would not stand by this with other things.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand your argument right now, because right now what it sounds like you're all saying is basically that once someone dies, because they can't know what happens, you just can't sell off your brand, basically.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's different. It's a different thing. He wouldn't have known what he was selling off, so to pretend like he did know what he was selling off is like kind of weird.
Well, he didn't know what he was selling.
I don't think
off.
it
was
matters.
His brand, who he was selling it to. maybe, I guess, but also he didn't sell it. He gave it to his estate, which was family members, and he gave them the right to do what they want with it. And also,
Right.
well, on like the point, like Kidology, you were like children engage with these books differently. And then I didn't hear anything differently that they engage in the way they engage in the books besides them engaging in the books less.
Can
Like
you
they all
elaborate
like
on that, actually?
children still engage with the books through the lens of the society we live in. They're just engaging with books less. And I feel like these books being like really old and not being to our sensitivities would actually be against what you even read out to be like his want for these books, which is to enthrall and to like spark imagination.
I wanna give Kidology a chance to elaborate. Can you elaborate on that? How are they engaging it differently?
Yeah, I think with what you were saying about what I said about Roald Dahl wanting children to be enthralled, he was talking about books, children's books in general, not necessarily about his books. So if his books are going to die out, which I mean, I would hazard that they probably would if there wasn't such a name around them, then that is what would happen. And you have new books that come out, as Parallax was saying. I think that's what I'm saying more so, rather than it being sort of about rather than it being about Roald Dahl's books being engaged with differently.
Okay, I mean, I don't know. I just find it dubious to assume that he would be talking about, oh, the purpose of children's books is to enthrall and spark imagination, but not minor. No, not
Okay.
mine.
So
I
don't think
just
he
don't.
said
I just don't
that.
believe. Yeah, I just don't believe. I believe that that these books would be more. My argument is just that I think that these books would be more engaging and enthralling to kids today if they were allowed to engage with them in the same way that other kids did before, which was like through the lens of our society that we have now, that could easily help these children engage with them the same way that older kids did, but it just a slight differences so they could understand it in the world that we live in today.
Okay,
So how much
Yes,
of
but the
I
difference
wonder-
is that they're engaging with these books not as readers, but as consumers and as potential consumers. Like, for instance, with books now, I saw a Roald Dahl book in which it says on the cover, now a Netflix film. This is trying to create something else to go to, as opposed to just being about reading the book in and of itself. There's an entire sort of industry and franchise around these books and these characters, which is just about selling more things, as
I mean, the
opposed
movie
to
came out
Also
50 years
also-
ago, so I feel like that's a really crazy argument.
No, actually, Matilda, it came out last year, December.
No, so
last
the
year.
original
Yeah.
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory came out like in 1971. So the idea that Roald Dahl as a brand that has movies and stuff is only recent. I think that's crazy.
Yeah,
There's been
Matilda
adaptations
is
of his works for years.
No, I'm saying sort of the over saturation of it, the
I understand.
continual remix.
Okay,
of
gang,
them.
I'm going to interject here because we are at the intermission time where the main show is winding to a close. I know some of you have to go, and I want to give you that opportunity. We're not ending the stream, so don't go anywhere. We're going to be taking call-ins. You can go if you want, right? You're not contractually obligated to be here, but if you want to continue this discussion, and I know there's audience members who have been frothing at the mouth that want to come on and have their say, that's where we're going to switch. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys a little bit about what's going on in the future, and also give you a chance to shout yourselves out and have please concise closing statements, so we can kind of end this portion and the actual video, and then we can just go into the after show. I will say that tomorrow
It
we're
do
going
be
to have the
storming.
xenogender debate,
It do be
pronoun
storming.
enforcement. And that's going to be Thursday on my Twitch at 6 p.m. Eastern. Friday, we'll have a much weightier topic. We're going to be talking about obesity and the obesity epidemic, and that'll be fun too.
Weightier, fuck
The
you.
week after, I am taking all but Wednesday off. So no panels, no streams like that, except for Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Irrelevant and Kidology will be facing off mano y mano in who is like the term incel for. Is Kidology stealing Irrelevant's valor? I don't know. We're going to find out. We'll see. But I'd like to thank you all for being here. Remember to if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe, please, people. It really helps the algorithm. Send me some super chat. Send me some money if you're on Twitch. Give me those subs. throw some bits at me. But with that, I will give the microphone over to Cypher to start with. Close us out, brother.
Hey, thank you, Wick, for having me on again. This is always a pleasure. Appreciate it. You reviving the debate scene. Good job on that. So to reiterate, my position is that ultimately I don't care, but there are some issues along the lines of general sociology that we can talk about, from copyright to whether or not we are over sanitizing the world for kids, creating more anxiety in the world and that. I hope that I was able to articulate my points well enough, and I think that the better conversation to have for a follow-up for this is not necessarily around copyright, but also the sanitation of everything that is going on. So if this is something that you enjoy, be sure to check me out Thursdays, and I will have to drop shortly. So if you want to talk to me after the stream, check me out tomorrow. I'm open for debates whenever. Thanks, Wick, again.
All right, thanks for being here. Find him at twitch.tv/crowdsourcepolitics. He's a great guy. Double Shine, please.
Yep. So I think virtually all the changes I saw are very much insignificant. And if somebody does have a problem with any specific change, I really implore them to make that the argument instead of this general idea of trying to respect the wishes of a dead author, because that's a really easy argument to make because it's unverifiable. So you can always resort back to it. You can always say that Roald Dahl would not have approved of this because, again, he's not here to actually give his side of the case. You can find me at Double Shine TV on Twitch and Twitter. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the panel.
I always appreciate you coming in. Like I said, you're my strongest soy soldier. I appreciate you
Of
even when we
course.
disagree. Thanks for and check him out, gang. He's great. Next up, Ice Beans, please.
Hey, Ice Beans. I personally don't care about preserving his image or anything like that. In fact, I'm the opposite of that. I think that there is a lot that you can criticize Dahl for, but that is exactly why I think that you should keep these his works as they are. They are already written for children. They don't need to be dumbed down anymore. I think that if you want to have a narrative about anti-fatness and things like that, then those things should be coming outside of the source material, not from the source material itself. I'm not against people actually going ahead and making these changes, but I think that I'll take a point that this panel has made, and essentially they should just be very clearly delineated, not attributed to the original author. And yeah, that's basically it. I stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays normally at 6 p.m. So I'm competing for Wix venting sessions.
It's okay. Compete away. It's not competition. A rising tide lifts all ships. We collaborate. We work together. Thank you for being here, Ice Beans. Always a pleasure. And I really appreciate you coming here. Kidology, please.
Yes, thank you as always for having me on, Wick. It is a pleasure as always, even though I'm very quiet and prefer to listen. I still enjoy just sitting here listening. But yes, I think overall, I think the important thing is that children are reading. But do I think that children should be, as I believe they are, being turned into little consumers based on this very generic take of sort of the zeitgeist by publishing houses and their consultants based on inclusivity? I think that's a very bad turn that we are taking, and I think it's just going to backfire in the long term. I think it's just going to be a sort of pendulum swing. These changes are not being made for anything aside from trying to reignite the franchise of an author, and I think it's very harmful to ignore the controversy of an author, of a human being. We should just face it, and we should begin anew with new authors. Let him die out slowly. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
On YouTube or on Twitter as well. I'm trying to get on Twitter a little bit. So yes, but on YouTube under Kidology. Yes.
Check her out, gang. She's great, and we really appreciate being here and enjoying these discussions. We'll get you talking more. That's my personal goal, is to get you more fighting. It was great, the back
Okay,
and
I'll
forth you had
try.
at the end there. It was an excellent back and forth, so we need to do that more.
Okay.
Next up,
Okay.
Double Shine, please.
Wait, I
Oh
already
gosh,
talked.
dang it! I can't tell white people apart. Please, Parallax,
I thought you meant me anyway. I thought you
Wow.
said
Yeah,
I
go
thought you
ahead.
said double
Parallax.
chin.
I know
My
it's
fault.
a problem.
I thought you said double chin, so I thought you were talking about me anyway. It's okay. You guys can find me at twitter.com/parallax, twitch.tv/parallax. I think that in general, sensitivity readers is definitely the appropriate name for these fuckers. Our society is getting wildly oversensitized. And I think that Ice Beams makes a super relevant point in that these works are already dumbed down. They're already written for children. I don't think that we have any need to dumb them down further. Children have been capable of digesting this information for quite some time and been capable of analyzing these complex things sometime. I also think that if you think that the changes are not that big, then there's no reason to argue for them being made. So it's a double-edged sword. That's a silly argument. I want to thank everybody for their time. It's been a pleasure. If I try to present myself as just kind of a real dude. I'm a realistic guy. I'm a happy father, down 140 pounds in the middle of a weight loss journey. Smoke a little bit of weed. So if that sounds like your thing, come on over to Twitch. Be happy to see you.
Parallax, you're my favorite deepfake. And to be clear, he is not real. He is an AI-generated deepfake, and you all should follow him anyway because he's the greatest AI I've ever seen. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate
have been called a
Parallax.
bot many times.
Yes, it's true. Last but certainly not least, Shark Zero.
Sure.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh. Ooh, sorry. There's a lot of thunder going on. I didn't want to hear you. Didn't want to ruin anything you had going on. When it comes to these books, it seemed I will never agree that anything along these lines are dumbed down. These books were published for the age that they were in, and if they had information or words in them that wouldn't be suitable for that time, they would have been edited in the same exact way. That nothing has changed, just the way in which we look at things have changed slightly. The editing is still the same amount of editing that we would have had before. I just find it very interesting that we like to call sensitivity or just not wanting to be super hateful or dunk on people or shit on people in like little children's books as dumbing it down. I think kids honestly these days get a lot of hate thrown towards them every single day. I don't think they need it all the time everywhere, even in the books that they read for their enjoyment. When it comes to these books and needing to have some sort of like everlasting permanence in the way that they were originally like published, you could still find them. We're making a lot of inferences about how you won't be able to find them, but then it wasn't that you won't be able to find them, it'll just be a little harder to find them. Oh, it may not even be necessarily that much harder to find them. They may possibly be just like a little bit more expensive. I don't know. It's not even done yet when it comes to the editing of these books and publishing them fully into paperbacks. And you could also find all of these books in near the exact same or the exact same position that they were published in originally online, and probably for free because nobody probably wants to make any money off of a lot of the stuff that Roald Dahl wrote. So you could just kind of find it. At the end of the day, it's not the biggest issue, but it's still important to a degree to which it's worth talking about sometime. At the end of the day, you could say it's wokeness or money or all of these types of things. At the end of the day, like, these books want to be published because somebody bought the rights and they want to publish them, and they're being published and they're more or less the same as they were written, and they give near the same ideas that they were written for normally. So I just don't think it's something worth like really losing sleep over. If you want the original work, read it. If you need it's the same with those old Confederate statues. If you really need to see them, that I don't need to be paying taxpayer dollars to walk by them every time I go to work. Put them in a museum. I think they'll be perfectly fine.
Okay. Where can people find you?
Nowhere. I don't exist, and I'm going to be ending it all soon. And when I say ending it all, I mean today, because I'm going to go to bed soon.
Okay. Well, I hope you stay
Oh, God.
Good save, dude. Good
is
save.
important there. Thank you for coming on my show. Hopefully it wasn't too terrible, and I
No problem.
appreciate
Appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, of course. Okay, gang. With that, we are going to open it up. So if you've been in chat molding, and I've seen some of your chats, and some of you are, and you're being like, these takes are so bad. Oh my goodness, I want to take them to the ringer. Well, stop being a chatter and start being a participant. Come into the backstage. We'll pull you in and we'll talk to you, right? And you can question anyone who chooses to stay. If people need to leave, they may depart at this time. But if you want to talk to us, I have thoughts, and I've had, believe it or not, to hold back on my thoughts because I was trying to be a good moderator. But it is what it is. So come on into the backstage and talk to us. How do you guys think it went overall? Like, just as in a conceptual sense, do you all feel you got enough time? Do you all feel you had space to speak? Do you all feel respected? Yeah.
In like a
Yeah,
panel setting, I don't think anything necessarily could have been like too much better. There was some back and forth that I feel like could have continued a little bit further before moving on, but mostly I thought it was all right.
Yeah, I thought it was a good exchange. I thought it was. What I thought was interesting is, I mean, is there anybody here who's like by and large conservative?
I thought you were gonna say bye.
I don't think
No,
I don't
no,
think
no.
I was
Yeah,
able
so
to get
yeah.
conservatives.
No, it's
today.
but
Parallax,
there was still a
honestly,
good amount
I
of
thought
disagreement. That's what I thought was interesting.
I thought you were gonna be the like a straight up conservative, calling everything woke, but
No,
like,
I'm
but
actually a
that's also
lefty.
because yeah. Well, see, I
I
didn't know
just
anything about you before
Well,
the panel.
just kidding.
okay.
People say I'm right wing because I'm a little center left, right? And so they obviously
Yeah.
I'm a Nazi. You know, cut a center left guy and a fascist bleeds, as they say. But yeah, and I think kidology. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're apolitical, correct?
Yeah, which makes me a Nazi as well.
As well.
Yeah, makes you a right winger.
There's 3
It's okay.
Nazis here.
That's
Wait,
a political
Kidology, are your
spectrum.
eyes blue by
There's
chance?
far left, and then there's Nazi, and there's nothing
Yes.
else in between.
Mm,
But we
mhm.
have a new guest here, Staxiums. Hello.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Beautiful. So just wanted to say I really only know Cypher and I can't turn on my camera right now. How's it going, guys? I just want to say that everyone was talking about respect for the dead. And in my personal opinion, it doesn't make a ton of sense to have I don't think the deads should really have a lot of rights, especially when it comes to progressiveness for today's kids or the future for kind of the future of the generation in general. I think that if the dead said that they want their text written in, like, locked in, but they're bad words and we don't agree with them anymore, I don't have any problem with kind of removing them if it means that we can progress as a society.
Well, I think we have to have some respect
take.
for the dead. Otherwise, we create like a really perverse incentive where, like, if you want somebody's work, you can go kill them, and now you have full right to go and basically do whatever you want with their work.
I think
kind of like that's kind of important that we have to preserve some kind of level of like respecting people's dead wishes. But the idea with copyright law is that when you die, your copyright is presumably going to be passed down to your estate, and they can do what they want with it. And at that point, I mean, it's the wishes of the estate. Obviously, you're not going to be able to stay true to whatever the author wanted.
Yo,
It seems
Stacks,
like a
Copyright
pretty-
is cringe as fuck. I'm
Stacks,
just
let
gonna
me-
put that out there.
Stacks, let me
It's a pretty
see if I
absurd-
understand. Right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
what like a good would a good analogy for your opinion be basically like the rights of like the dead need to end somewhere, and the public good, or like what would be good for the public has to begin somewhere, basically. So if like an author said like, I don't want any of my books to be written to like Indian people, you'd be like, that's not
Right
like,
back,
a
my
right that
kid's
we
crying.
would respect.
Wait, sorry, I missed the last little bit of what
Sure,
you said.
so,
Sorry, what
like-
about Indian people?
So yeah, so like some rights, like the rights of an author have to end somewhere, and so like the good of the public has to begin somewhere. So if an author said, I don't want many of my books to be sold to like this minority group, that wouldn't be a right that we would respect.
Yeah, exactly. And even if it made sense at the time, I think that we need, in order to progress as a society, we can't keep like holding all of these dead people essentially sacred and all of their opinions sacred in the past, and we can move on as a society and maybe change a few things.
Sure. Can I ask then? Do you feel
Yeah.
that right, like, do you think it's holding someone dead sacred to preserve what they've said or written in their original form? Do you think that's holding them sacred?
I think
Or
I think
agreeing
it
with
can
their
be,
works?
but I think it can be, but it's a priority to me to make sure that we have good morals and we can progress as a society, and I put that way over holding dead people sacred. if
And
that
Okay,
also
what about
like
what
you,
about? Oh,
you could still get those older books, they are preserving it, or like the original books, or like a version of like before the sensitivity editors, you could still get them, and they're still publishing them, and they
No,
still
no,
preserve them. No, I wasn't talking to
Just
you,
real
but
quick,
I
just
get
real
you.
quick, gang. YouTube's asking how we call in. I'll give you the Discord link, YouTube, and you can click that. And what you do is you go backstage, and when we're ready, like this is probably as full as we're gonna get tonight. And as soon as they're done talking, we're gonna cycle them out, and we're gonna get you in. But let me give you that link, YouTube.
Yeah, I can't stay for
also-
long, so I can dip.
Also in response to it, what do you think about keeping something as it is because we don't want to necessarily
repeat
like
it, like Mein Kampf. If we edited Mein Kampf
Sure.
to suddenly be totally cool with a lot of people, and people are like,
Like-
"Oh, why was this Hitler such a bad guy?" Right?
Wait,
Like,
what's the
I don't think
point
Like,
of
I
kids
context
reading
that
Mein
Roald Dahl
Kampf?
is being. I don't think that's the context that Roald Dahl is being read in. Like, if you pick up Mein Kampf, there's going to be some huge disclaimers in the beginning, like, "Hey, this is not what we stand for anymore. I want to make sure." And if you're given to it, or if you're taught about it in class, it's going to be taught with that context. I don't think Roald Dahl is really written or read in those contexts in classrooms. I think it's like, oh, here's some fun little quirky children's books that we can read in first grade in order to learn how to read. I think
Wait,
those
but what
contexts are
makes you say
completely
that?
dissimilar.
What makes you say that? Do you know for a fact that Roald Dahl is being discussed in children's classrooms without any discussion about?
I mean, how I read Roald Dahl, I had it on my book, my little, like my cupboard at home, and then when I went into class, there was there's just this huge bookshelf of books, and you would just pick a book and read it silently to yourself during reading time. That was
And
my
also,
experience in
I
elementary
don't believe
school.
any of these books are necessarily they're not in classrooms still because there's some huge historical mark on our culture. They're in classrooms still because they're time tested and they're a part of the cultural zeitgeist. They're
Yeah,
they're
there's
just kind of
nothing
reading
substance
that you
in those
do when you're
books.
little.
Can we be clear about that? There's
Time
like
tested
no
enough,
I got-
apparently.
substance to the
Hey,
books.
it's
I
really
gotta go,
hard to
guys.
hear you.
Sorry.
Admiral Love, hold on.
Guys.
Guys, yes. See you later.
It's also
Ad-
worth. Oh, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
Admiral Love, can you say something again? Because you were really robot-y.
Oh,
I
my
just
bad.
wanna make-
Hear me?
Oh, that's gonna be a problem. Anyway, carry on.
It's also worth mentioning that if Mein Kampf were on like a children's bookshelf in first grade, I would have an issue with that, right? So there's obviously this huge they're incomparable to me to like memorialize Mein Kampf, because I don't think we should just throw it away or burn it. I also think that should be taught with proper context, but I don't think that that's how Roald Dahl is ever taught.
Fair.
What did I miss?
I think though that that's they see, even if I think my what I would push for is essentially, instead of essentially re-releasing these, essentially have a movement where we do start talking about Roald Dahl in classrooms in this critical context, right? We already do it on book forums, some every one of you probably learned about the problematic views that he has at some point, or the stuff that's in the books at some point. You learned that. I just think that we just need to be pushing those way more.
Yeah, but
and so I think my point is, I think we do need to be having those conversations in the classrooms instead of just releasing a more sanitized version of those books, which would if you had to take a teacher and say, okay, which version of the Roald Dahl book do you want in your classroom? It's probably going to be the new one, right? At some point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
But I
don't-
think
don't
you're giving
wanna-
I think Ice Beans, I think you're giving advice to two entirely different groups, and that's kind of why both of your positions can be true, right? Or at least the idea that the publishing company can still choose to sanitize their book, and then on the consumer end, I think for example in a classroom, I think it's totally fine to teach the old version, or to go over that stuff, but it just, those aren't mutually exclusive.
No, I think that's fair. And again, I think that we've kind of established that there's a world where we can do this, but it's a matter of the how, right? The execution seems to be flawed. Can I ask you a question, Double Shine?
Yeah, of course.
Are you unironically dressed as Willy Wonka?
Hell yeah, dude! I'm glad someone caught
love
it.
it.
No, listen,
I
I
love
noticed
it.
I noticed immediately, and I was like, okay, and then you stood up and I saw all the colors of the buttons, and I was like, okay, now I can no longer ignore this. This motherfucker is Willy Wonka.
I had a little purple coat just for the show.
Can I
So,
come see your chocolate factory?
Staxiums.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Staxiums,
Yeah, what's up, Wick?
did you have your question answered? Do you feel
Yeah,
fulfilled?
for the most part. I would say that I think that the best way to sort of go about this is to just have a little bit of a disclaimer at the beginning of the book, hey, there's some not great things in this book, and you should probably be aware of that when you read it,
Sure.
and maybe not distort the text. But I don't really see it as that much of a big deal to change the text either. But that would probably be my preference.
How about
Exactly.
have a edition where you change the text and also have the original edition where you also say that it's problematic?
Yeah. I think we're all okay with that, right? As long as we make the declaration in
look,
both.
Again, my main issue with this, and just to be clear, my main issue with this is that they are presenting it as the author's original works.
Yeah, that's why I
And
said the
that
declaration
is
in
the
both.
problem. And
Right.
if they were to change that, I would no longer have as big of a problem with it as I do. If they were to make that very crystal clear, right? And I can imagine scenarios where I'd be fine with it and scenarios where I wouldn't be fine with it. But that is the insidious portion of this. This idea that more and more of our literature is becoming digitized. We are preserving these things in digitized formats. And the ability for the owners of, or the keepers of the digitized spaces to make edits, this time they told us. What happens when next time they don't tell us? And when it's not just a children's book, but when it's the works of a prominent philosophical leader, when it's the works of Plato or Aristotle or something a little more impactful. This is the thin end of the wedge, right?
Does anybody even own the work, like the works and the words of Plato and Aristotle? Is there even any copyright? Wait, I know for a fact there isn't any copyright for that.
No,
Like,
but
you
they are
can't do that.
preserved digital. They are preserved digitally, and we can imagine, right? The keeper of that space, or the people who are in charge of digitizing and doing that, being able to make edits or corrections. And that
Okay,
could
but
be
like
a problem.
also like not for one, like it is known that these edits were made and they talked about it and they were very public about it. It may not be, I don't know, I don't like, the books haven't been printed yet, whether or not they have like your sufficient amount of disclosure that they've been edited or something. So I'm not sure necessarily yet. But what I can say is that they did make it very clear that they were editing, and they also have all of the edits online for people to preserve like what was actually said, because it's a piece of history, but it's also a book at the end of the day.
But you're not engaging with the 30 years
just
down
really
the road
quick,
scenario.
Harold,
You're not
I wanna
engaging
give-
with that.
Yeah, I want
Engage
to give the other people a chance.
Okay.
The other people that came in, right? Specifically for this, we got Tuna, we got Euclid, and we got our friend Debate Boar. We were asking for a conservative opinion. Well, you guys, you said his name 3 times in a mirror. What do you all think, newcomers? One at a time. Let's hear Tuna Chip, then Euclid, then Debate.
Cool. So, number one, I think that society has a duty towards historical accuracy and truth, and that needs to be respected in books more than just the property and the intellectual property rights. So, I think that on the front cover of all of these books, bigger than the name of the original author, should be the people that made the most recent edits. I think that at a certain point, it becomes more the work of the editor than them, merely by the fact that they've made that edit. So when you're making that book, if you're putting the cover, you're putting Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Doll is going to be on there, and there's going to be a need to be a descriptor saying in the works of, or inspired by the works, or edited. But then the editor's name needs to be on the front cover, in my opinion, because having it inside of a little page that you skip, having it at the back, what we're really talking about is what is the standard that the government should be holding them to. That would be the first thing. And I would also say that copyright is not enough when we're talking about these things, because these pieces of literature, the reason that they're still sold to this day and they're able to be a brand is because they've had a cultural impact. And because of that, they have there's a certain responsibility towards holding up what that impact was, when that impact was, what the history of that was. If anybody has input on that, if you think that's too extreme, I'll go into that, and then I have a couple of other points on it.
No, you, much like always, are pretty much correct. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Parallax.
I think I would like that kind of flows into my point. I supported a point earlier where basically I just want new material at that point, right? Like at that point, if you're just going to make especially if you're coming in and making I think that they're pretty extensive. I don't think that they're like insignificant. I think some of them are like fine, again, like I said, but if they're so extensive, you've altered so many books, then at that point you have created a new work. And I think it should be your name on the cover, yeah.
Wait, I want to ask Tuna and maybe Wick, would you feel the same way about like a translation? Do you think the person who translated a book should have their, it should be bigger than the author?
Well, I don't know about bigger.
well,
I don't
no.
know if I hold that stance of bigger than the author, but they should be translated by X. Right.
There's a huge relevance there, especially when you're doing like works of philosophy from German or French into English. There have been many instances where people's works have been massively altered in their intended meaning. Just right now, the first thing that comes to mind is like Max Stirner, when talking about this idea of like phantasm, specter, using the word spook for English speakers, especially Americans, created a lot of context and a lot of bias against a lot of those works, and it's really important to like see why and who is responsible for these mistranslations. The fact that in what is it, in Nietzsche there are like three different three different meanings for a slight variation on the same word that are like pun. A lot of these workers have fucking like very slight differences, like the difference between resentment and resentment has been like a huge issue.
Fun fact about Nietzsche, his works were edited by his sister after she got the rights to be more anti-Semitic, right?
Exactly.
So a lot of the reasons that people view Nietzsche as anti-Semitic is because people went and his sister edited it to be more anti-Semitic, and so people think he's like this raging anti-Semite now. And
There's a
you know,
fucking Nietzsche quote.
And
for everything, but-
if you understand Nietzsche's work, Nietzsche was like okay, if you want to put it right now, Nietzsche was like a soy boy, very much wanted everybody to be artistic. He had like this whole thing against war and government. But yeah, to be then partied in with the Nazi party. Not to say that people don't change over the course of their life. Now, the other thing I was going to say, and you actually pivoted to it pretty well there, Wick. What do we think? What is it about the fact that this is a move towards sensitivity and not towards insensitivity that makes it so that people are more supportive of it? If I was to take a work of Dahl and I was to replace the children and I would say, actually, instead of having a fat girl, we're going to have a trans girl and we're going to detransition her, and that's the story of her character. People would be absolutely needing, they would be begging to have the author that made those changes towards that narrative put onto the front of the cover. So if we're going to do something that makes something more progressive, then we're going to have to put the name on there. Less progressive, put the name on there. It's all political. The idea of, well, that's not a significant change. That's not a, because it's only significant if it's making the world a worse place by our particular political script. So that's like one of my main issues there.
I want to give some of the other
Such a
people
great
here
point.
Chip,
That's such a great point.
Debate, I guess, and Euclid.
Yeah.
So debate first. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to the person who, up in the Willy Wonka outfit up there, appreciate that too. That's cool. You know, the question, we have examples where translations have not just the translation, but the original work that's facing that translation. And you think of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. When you open up that book, you have the translation, and it's very clear that someone did a translation, and what that and the altered text is accompanied by the original text. And I think that's, if we're not going to do that here, then we should do what Puffin was not intending to do until it was discovered. They weren't public about the edits that they were doing. And I'm only using the word edit here very loosely because I think too many are hiding behind the word edit. This is a rewrite. When you change Kiplinger to Autzen and you change India to California, right? This is not merely editing where you look at the construction of a sentence, you look at word efficiency of what's being written, much as you would see in newspaper, columns. Instead, we're actually seeing characters being changed outright. And this isn't happening in one or two examples. There's hundreds of these so-called edits, and I think we're hiding behind the word edit to sort of minimize the changes that are really being made in pursuit, not of fidelity to the text or the author, but in pursuit of ideology.
Wait, I'm super curious. Can you actually point to like an example of a massive change? Because the example you brought up is that Matilda was reading Jane Austen instead of reading Rudyard Kipling, which in the grand scheme of things I think is wholly irrelevant, and nobody here would have even remembered that from the text.
Well, notice
She
what
was
you
drinking
did though
black
is
coffee instead of milk
introduced the
coffee,
word
so
massive.
Literally the different book. Literally a different book.
Right. So now what's happening is engaging in a shifting of goalposts to say, okay, well, sure, we acknowledge that it was rewritten, but you know what? It wasn't such a massive rewrite that changed the whole formulation of the story. That doesn't matter. What matters is the basis of the changes. It isn't fidelity to the original story. It isn't updating language because our language has evolved. No, it's simply, in this case, erasing Kiplinger. That's the intent. It's to erase him, not to say that, we need a female character here. That's not the point at all.
Okay, I think that there is a bit of erasure going on, but here's an example of that erasure. The original quote is imported direct from Lumpaland, said Mr. Wonka proudly, and now it's they come from Lumpaland. Do you think that that's a change that's maybe that has no effect whatsoever, or that doesn't erase anything?
It sounds
Or
pretty
would-
benign,
or
to be
would-
honest with
No,
you.
I think she's
Would
asking,
anyone-
double and
Well,
Yeah,
no,
no,
I guess would
so
anyone agree? Would anyone agree, or would anyone like assert that that is a change that is not, I guess, problematic?
No, I totally agree. I think that like in general, rewriting Willy Wonka as like this benevolent factory owner that's like cares about his like Oompa Loompas, I think that is pretty damn crazy.
Mhm.
But I think that that part of the text wasn't really something that was like super prominent to the entire work as a whole. And I'm not gonna like sit here and get like caught up in the semantics of edit or rewrite because like realistically, I don't think you could tell me like a substantial difference between those two words.
There is a
Right, so
substantive
I
difference.
actually
Wait,
fundamentally
there is- wait,
disagree.
there's
No,
a-
no,
I can absolutely do that for you.
Yeah,
but
There's
we're
so
all-
many variations.
But I fundamentally disagree with the first part of your argument. I actually think that the totality of these edits actually do take away from the totality of the message that Wonka, or that Dahl was trying to send. So, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is fundamentally a story about Charlie being a character who is virtuous, who is good, who is kind, and all of these other characters have fundamental flaws. And Augustus Gloop, one of them, is that he's gluttonous, he's greedy. Okay, these are all characters that are fundamentally flawed, and so each time we sanitize these characters and we make the descriptors of them a little nicer, we take away from the overall message Dahl is trying to deliver by
Great point.
describing Charlie as a virtuous character. It just is a rewriting of the story in a subtle way. You can say it's subtle. I don't give a fuck. It's still a rewrite.
So Parallax, would you have said that they have to keep the African pygmies in the factory?
I think we have all said that that was an acceptable change. And I think we all said it a long
So
time
then,
ago.
then,
especially
then
since
why?
it was
Because that's a
written-
full rewrite. So
I
I'm
don't
curious
know
what your
if,
difference is there.
Dahl was
No, no,
alive.
I
we
think
all
that
think-
you should have kept
Dahl,
him.
we're
Yeah,
Why not?
Hold on,
Dahl
hold on.
Guys, stop,
Dahl was
everyone,
alive.
one at a time, because I would say that they probably shouldn't have changed that. In fact, I'll be stronger. They should not have changed that, right? We could point out it's problematic. We can have a disclaimer at the front of the book saying, hey, some of the stuff in here, talk to your parents about it, kids, right? But they absolutely should not have made that change because it fundamentally changes one aspect of the story, which Roald Dahl, I should say, did not write. But I want to give Tuna a last question here because we got people waiting, so we got to cycle, and then I want to get Euclid in on this. So go ahead, Tuna.
Sure. So when I made the notes before, I was talking about what the private duty and what the government duty are. And I think that the other half of this is the school's duty, the educational duty. And I think that a school, whether or not it's private or public, the function that it has and the most important responsibility it has is to teach curriculum and to teach curriculum as efficiently as possible. So when we're talking about the censoring, if you make the Oompa Loompas no longer pygmies. The whole thing that's lost there is that you're losing the implicit curriculum of the text. You were losing the time that it was written, who was writing it, the context in which the book was written, all of which is actually very important. Now, if you don't want to teach it during a certain grade, you don't need to. But just as easy as kids can ignore a detail and wait until later in their life to bring it up, they are able to compartmentalize that information, and a teacher is able to say, hey, we're not going to talk about the politics of exactly what was being spoken here because you're in first grade or something. But when you get into junior high, you're going to be able to have a more critical approach of the text, and the parts of the text that will need to be discussed will be familiar to you, and they will be integrated, and you won't have to be looking at this differently. So I think that schools have a duty to put the original text for the fact that it is a historical fact in the implicit curriculum, not just the explicit curriculum. And to nullify it from that is this idea that we need to we need to separate kids from education. That's the point.
Tuna, thank you for being. Any responses to him before he goes? I'll give you guys one shot. Be brief.
I mean, it's just like
chip.
Thanks for stopping in, Tuna.
Okay, let's
Sure.
Shark. Go ahead.
Great points,
sure.
Tuna.
Like these, I don't know why like some of these words are so important that kids need to read them at that age. If they really need to read them, then they could just read the unedited version of the book when they're older. Like they're already familiar with the book because the edits are nowhere near as substantial as you're trying to make them out to be. Like the idea that the Oompa Loompas are like,
Right.
from a fake land of Loompa Land and not like actual
stupid.
African pygmies, like
No.
that actually could
hold
be
on.
pretty insightful. Like once you're older and be like, oh, that's interesting.
Tuna, thank you again. We got to cycle you. I'm sorry, man. You're great.
Yeah. See you later.
Also. Okay, debate. Euclid, actually. Let's let Euclid have a say here. Go ahead. You've been waiting patiently, so I will reward your patience. Let's let Euclid have.
I guess on the one hand,
Oh no, you got to turn off the stream, buddy. Right? You got to mute the stream. We're getting echoes.
Oh, this is a grade A fail. Is this like void stuff here?
Well, let's give him a chance to fix it. Give him a chance to fix it. Let's give him an opportunity.
Debatable's ruthless.
Debatable is ruthless. He's conservative. That's why.
That's me.
You want to give that another shot, Euclid? Whenever you're ready.
Take your time.
Maybe while we wait, I think this was a
Sound it
great
out.
point that Parallax made, and that was, look, if these changes are so insignificant, then why make them? In fact, why was Puffin not just making them, but doing it in secret, if you will, before it was
Can you
discovered?
elaborate that?
I will not,
Can you elaborate on
actually.
that? Because as I understand, debate board. As I understand debate board, I'll use your name. Sorry, my bad. As I understand debate board, that they were public with these changes. So what makes you think? Where is your source here that they were secret? Because I had not heard that before.
Oh, I've got to dig back through, but my understanding of the situation that was that they were working with Inclusive Minds. Is that the name of the firm they were working
Yes,
with?
they hired them to do a rewrite,
Right.
but I think they were
And
public about that. Were they not?
Well, I thought that I read that was only after the rewrites were actually published, whether that was digitally or otherwise, then that the public actually responded to the rewriting. So the duration of the rewriting that was going on wasn't public, as far as I understood it.
Does anyone else have any?
You mean you said the
corroborating
public
Wait, are you-
responded, or like the people started to pick it up and care and talk about it? You're telling me they never made a press briefing, they never said anything on their website, they never like made any public statements they're going to be like republishing these books anywhere ever at any point in time until like it was already
That's
out
a silly
or something, or it
question,
was
of course,
leaked?
because we cannot be exhaustively knowledgeable about every single aspect of anything.
Okay, so if they actually
it
made a
is
statement,
quite
then they're not
possible
lying.
that I didn't see something. I'm
Okay.
humble enough as a conservative, I can acknowledge that. But as far as I know, it wasn't until something was published, right? Oh, there's another echo. That something was
Salman
published,
Rushdie, who
that the public
first sort
reacted
of
to
brought
it.
Go
Yes,
ahead. Kidology, educate us. Salman Rushdie, who is
Yeah, please, I could be
motherfucking
wrong.
hero.
That's fine.
Right.
Yes, I think that was when it was first brought to sort of the public light. And in terms of how Salman Rushdie actually found out about this, who knows? I mean, I guess being an author, I think the issue is that Inclusive Minds, it seems quite lucrative in that there's no information about what consultancy is happening, what precisely is going on. Sort of information is just trickling out about all the individuals, these sensitivity readers who were on this sort of consultancy board or what have you for Puffin. It's all coming out now as a consequence of just this huge blow up. And I think not knowing how much they were paid, not knowing anything sort of concrete or meaningful about what is actually going on or what actually went on. I think that is the problem. I think that's why it's quite easy to sort of have a bit of a conspiratorial mind around this.
It's
Sure.
it's
I think it would
problematic
be-
that not every single person who worked on the editing has their name on the front of the book or like in the book or somewhere. Don't they work on behalf of the company? Isn't the company? And wait, don't they work on behalf of a company that's working on behalf of the publishing firm?
Yeah,
Inclusive
for sure.
Minds.
No, I'm talking about the publisher. They're working on behalf of the publisher. Like the only reason why they're even near the book is because the publisher wanted them to be there, right?
Yeah, I think Puffin hired them to go ahead
Yeah,
and
it
do
appears so.
Yes. So like if like Puffin's name is on the book, isn't it? Like that's their work. They had to sign off on all that work. Any edit that the sensitivity editors made had to be confirmed by Puffin. I don't know
Yeah,
why
also
we're talking about Inclusive Minds here.
Inclusivity Minds doesn't actually make any edits. They just give you
Oh,
suggestions.
yeah, they're just suggestions,
like,
right?
you
Yeah.
should just they don't actually do any of the
So
rewriting. They
so
just said,
every
like,
single
hey,
person
maybe you
who ever
shouldn't
made a
use this word.
suggestion ever should always be should be bigger than the author of the book that they suggested should be edited, or else it's immoral and destroying culture and society.
No, but whoever actually does the edit, right? Like whoever they
Puffin.
have that actually on site who
Puffin.
actually takes these suggestions and does this edit, right?
That's
The
Puffin.
specific person or group of people make it
Yeah, but
clear.
then if it was
The fucking
Puffin,
head
then what's the
editor.
point of
The
inclusive
fucking head
minds?
editor. It's not that complicated.
Well, you
So-
don't even
so-
need the name. You just have to acknowledge that it has been altered
They did.
and
Right.
describe the nature of the alterations.
They did.
You don't even
isn't
have to
complicated.
ascribe it to an individual or group. Just
Like everything you're asking
acknowledge
for has already
that
been
the work
done.
is altered.
I do think it would be really cool though, and maybe like some of you would agree. I think it would be really cool if like Inclusivity Minds or Penguin actually published like a list of what some of the changes represented. So like for some of them, like I think
What do
the
you mean
BFG.
represented?
So
Like
the
why they
reason
made
for
the
why
change.
they wanted
Yeah,
to change
so-
them? Did
Yeah,
they
so
say?
like the BFG no longer has a black cloak, and I don't really get that because it's just a color. But maybe I'm out of the loop here. So
Oh, imagine hearing
No,
the
it-
explanations for these changes.
No, they also removed. Whoa, hold on, echo.
Diffem, can you mute the stream? We're getting an echo, so mute the stream on your end, and then you can participate in the discussion. But
Double Shine. They also removed black as a description for one of the digging machines in Fantastic Mr. Fox. So I think
Yeah,
that it must have been it might have been a removal of the word black for like
They
a
changed
negative
the color of the
connotation.
tractors. Yeah, they
Yeah.
changed the color of the tractors because it was somehow racist to imply that
Well-
tractors working in a field could be
Wait, did
black.
they say that
Well, I
it was
think-
racist that the tractors were black?
No,
it's just
I
that
think
the
we're
next
saying that
sentence-
we're saying that it's implication.
The next
I'm
sentence was
speculating.
calling the next sentence was calling the tractor murderous, brutal-looking beast. So I think describing that as black, I think that's that's different than just calling a cloak
Oh my
black.
god, it's a
Well,
color.
see, but
I would
that's fine.
again,
Okay,
but that's what I'm
so
saying. I would love to hear the explanations from Inclusivity Minds. I'm just saying that it's not like they just removed the word
I
black.
want to hear the explanations, mostly because I think they're going to be a little farcical. And I think I would like to laugh. I could use a laugh, right?
Sure, yeah, and I'd love to take issue with some
Straight
of
up
those
comedy
changes. I mean,
material.
Sure, I don't
And
think that's an issue.
I think
Hashtag
too
not all tractors.
that speaks to my desire, by the way, to like have these discussions with the original text, because like then you can go in and say, hey, look class at how like these words are being used to portray, like, to give that negative connotation to black. That's because otherwise that's a rather like benign sentence in and of its own right. It's just a description of a color, but it's being used alongside these words, and so yeah.
I want
Okay,
to give
can't you already do that?
defem def meta.
Yeah, you can, but not with the new versions, right?
Am I still
Well, you could
messing
just
up
show
with
them the old versions.
No,
But
edit
not with the new.
echo?
no, you're not. You're not echoing def meta. But def meta, I want to give you a chance to have your say. So go ahead, have your say.
But I'm actually Noah Brown from the chat, not Def Meta, but that's my nickname. But I wanted to originally talk about translation and how that changes the original text of any work. But I think you guys have kind of gone over that completely.
Yeah, don't they
So-
already talk about like who's like I've been getting into reading manga, and like it's very clearly
Yes.
translated by and the name of the
Yeah.
person that the author worked with to translate is literally right there every single
Absolutely,
time.
but again, it's like even with anime and manga, then the translations are often, people will search out the fan translations rather than the official translations, because often they're a little more nuanced and a little more accurate to the text. But again, it's translating something. It's not taking the original text, Roald Dahl's original books, and editing it so that it feels better for 2023 rather than 1964. And I think that's my main issue with it, is that there's like a dismissal of the authenticity of what we have in the historical record of authors, filmmakers, musicians, whatever it is. You need to keep that, because if you don't keep that, then essentially everything becomes, malleable, and the ability to change the meaning of something or the contextual meaning of something. I don't know. For me, that's like a hard.
like, can you explain why that's so important? That like,
Wait, can I
change things
ask
over
a
time?
question? Wait, can I ask something? Because this may get like a better answer possibly. If you're okay with that.
Wow, he just called your question dog.
No, that's
shit.
fine.
No, but-
Go ahead.
but the
I'll
question-
go back to mine if I don't like it.
Sure, but the question, and you could let me know if you think so. The question would be like, what is the point of children reading these books that makes you believe that the historical authenticity specifically of this book is important to the children reading it in school, or just for fun?
Okay, well, I can answer that because I grew up reading Roald Dahl books. I had like a stack of 5 Roald Dahl books on my bookshelf when I was a kid. I read them, I don't know, I was probably like 9, 10 when I started reading those kind of books. I read them and I understood them as a kid, just as stories about witches, about a big fucking giant, about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
They were friendly giant.
A big
fucking
oh,
giant.
big fucking giant.
No, I like big fucking giant.
Oh,
no, but I read them as a child, and that was
how
fine.
dare you edit his original work? But go on.
that was editing. I read them as a child, and I read them with a child's perspective. It was later that I looked back on those books, and maybe I didn't even look back on the Roald Dahl books until I was way older, till I was actually like 25, 30, whatever. But maybe this happened more with the books I read when I was a teenager, when I was like 16, and I read like Robert Heinlein books and various sci-fi authors who, you know, I found later on were much more problematic, and that was a quicker transition to kind of looking at what I was reading and what was being told to me by these texts. But that whole function of looking back at something that you've read and that you understood in a particular state of mind, in a particular stage of your life, and then reevaluating, well, what was the meaning here, and was this a good meaning? Was this something that I should continue to agree with, or is this something that I should look at? That's a function of how you learn to be a person who
So,
you know,
in other words, the growth that you get by reevaluating what you thought when you were younger when reading these works and going back to these same works when you were older is a necessary part for education and
I
growing.
believe
Is
so,
that what
yeah,
you're
and
saying?
I think it's especially true when you're, you know, when you grow up and you're reading books from the 60s. I grew up in the 80s, but I was reading Roald Dahl books from the 60s. Okay, so there's going to be kids now and growing up in the 2010s who are reading books from the 2000s. There's going to be problematic shit in there for sure. So they're going to have to go back and revisit that, and that will be part of their growth process.
Okay.
I think
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting.
Well, I want to see if that answers Shark's question, because Shark asked him the question, do you find that sufficient, Shark, or do you still find it wanting?
I mean, like, that wouldn't, wait, would you agree that that wouldn't be the context that the children would be reading it when the book was originally published?
No, when I read the Roald Dahl books when I was a kid, it was from a kid's perspective, and it was purely for the story. I didn't pick up on any of the, you know, misogyny or the racism or the way that the Oompa Loompas were a little problematic. I didn't pick up on it. I was just, it was cool. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but then I did later.
Okay.
And if you don't have the original version to go back to, you can't do that.
Well, you would have
Okay.
the original version to go back
Because
to.
then I
Well,
go back
here's
to
the
it.
thing. No, but okay. Here's the thing.
It's just
Shark,
okay.
like, I know.
Ice and then Kidology. Go ahead. Ice, Kidology. That's the order.
I know what you're saying. Yes, the books are still there, and they're still going to be, like, you know, able to be referenced. It's not like they're going anywhere. I understand that, right? But I think that I think personally, my worry is if, like, these books ever became, like, obviously I can't stop this from happening, right? But if these books ever became like the official versions in the minds of the public eye, then it would be harder to go back and do that growth process that this commentator was
And to
just
be
saying.
clear, we have other examples where this has happened in the past, because this isn't the first time that this has happened, where they've been massively rewritten and republished. That absolutely is the case. No one knows that Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys were massively rewritten. So the versions that all of us read as children are probably substantively different from when they were originally published. And that's how these things work over time. Like, we all know now, because it's in our heads, it's on the news. To Shark's point, they're doing all these talk shows with all these thousands of views. But 20 years from now, it's just going to be the way things are, baby.
My question is it really the way that is it really that nobody knows, or is it that just nobody cares, or they agree?
It's a combination of the two, I am sure.
Do you think if you polled my question, okay, and then I'll just let it go. Do you think if you polled your average person, if you showed the if you're like, hey, this is the editings that were made, do you think your average person would be like, this is
no? But the average person doesn't care about a lot of things that they probably should. They don't care about global climate change. They don't care about trans rights. They don't care about a lot of things.
Cares
that
about
people
all
just
of those
should,
things, actually.
Right? Hmm?
Your
You
average
think the
person cares
average
about all
person
of
cares
No, but
about?
they don't care about them when
Yes,
they're
they don't.
11.
You can't.
They care about
You
them when
can't
they're
speak to that.
14,
Wait,
15.
there have been polls done on this. Your average person does like care about trans rights. Yeah.
And this is all irrelevant, though, because whether or not we care in some substantive way right now is irrelevant, because the reason this is getting pushback is because this is the start of the classic slippery slope.
No, I think there's
It
reason. I
starts
think
with
it's getting pushed back
monuments, it
because
starts with erasing people from history, and now we're attempting to substantively rewrite works in secret without notifying the public and erasing the originals. Remember, it was only a few days ago that Puffin acknowledged that they would maintain the Penguin collection alongside of their rewrite. Okay,
I
the
do not
intention
stand
was
with this
not
being
to
tied
maintain that.
monuments.
I want to give Chance Kidology had something to
some
say, and we'll give
bullshit.
her some space to do. She's got to learn to throw elbows though, and just kind of bully them. But we'll ease her in. Go ahead, Kidology.
Yes, I mean, I just wanted to agree with Noah Brown's point about the importance of going back to these works, going back to these authors at different stages in your life, which is really the essence of real, genuine critical thinking. There's sort of something to discover in these books, throughout your life. And that's what is hoped for, I think, at least by sort of what Roald Dahl was saying about this idea of sort of creating readers, lifelong readers in children with books and children's books. So I think that is what is missing in this. And also this idea of, why can't you just edit these books? I think that how demoralizing is that for any aspiring author or writer when their work potentially could just be sort of ripped out from under their feet once they die? It's, I think, incredibly dystopian, actually, when you really think about the potential in the future. This could.
So
Yeah.
I think you
Let's
were
see,
drawing.
I interrupted her. Finish. Oh,
No,
you're
no,
done?
it's fine. I'm basically
Okay.
done. I was just gonna say.
There's an old Soviet joke that I have to take a bio break, so I'll put Parallax in charge. Okay, after I'm gone.
Okay.
So there's an old Soviet
joke.
joke. The future's already written. It's the past that just keeps on changing, right? And I think that's applicable to this scenario. But anyway, I'll be on a bio break, so be good. No slurs.
Do you?
First off, I
wait,
just want to
wait,
address.
I have a really interesting
Hold on,
question.
hold on. He put me in charge because I was going to say something.
Go ahead.
I think that it is very important to focus to hone in on what Noah said, to acknowledge that there is a growth that can take place. And I think it's also really important to notice that some of this is anecdotal. This is all very right now, right? So for me personally, when I went back and did that growth thing, I don't know what led Noah down that, but it was actually through reading more modern written literature. It was Harry Potter. So having written J.K. Rowling's work and seeing there was just something different in the way it was written. And Ice Beans, you described it earlier as Roald Dahl wrote like mean. He wrote with a meanness, and there was that was intent. And there was no meanness in when I read Harry Potter, and that was what made me go back and look at some of these works. Shark Zero, you were gonna go ahead.
Sure. So for one, like the idea that your works can be edited once you're dead, I'm pretty sure artists ever since like their work can be owned by somebody else have known this, and it hasn't stopped them yet writing and profiting from what they've been, or their children from profiting from what they've done. It seems like they're perfectly aware and perfectly fine with that. Or if they weren't, then they'd write something about it later. And if they don't, then I mean, sucks to suck, you're dead. And also I have like an interesting question, okay? And then I'll probably have to go sometime soon. Do you think that problematic elements, do you think that racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia should be added to books so children can after that wake up and later and then be like, oh, OMG. So, because like I do agree that there is a value. Wait, and then I'm not. Because I'm not going to argue that there's not a value to looking back and things that you read before and you were like, aha, that's funny. But then you're like, oh, that had more meaning later. And I still believe all of these books have that in there, especially when it comes to Augustus Gloop, I guess. Like, oh, he's just like, he really likes chocolate when you're like little. And then you're like, oh yeah, he was actually like, he was gluttonous to a fault. And that like really harmed him and put him down like a bad path. Would you look at that? And Charlie was the great guy. That all can still happen without any of these edits, but yeah.
He was the representation of gluttony, no? He was a representation of a sin. So. I think that's what he was getting at.
So Shark Zero,
In answer
think,
to your question,
I
go
think
ahead.
you made a very good point that like it is possible that the journey could still take place with the edits. I think that's fair. Okay. I just think that there's less it's a less profound journey if you take away some of the edge, if you will. I just think it's less profound. I would also push back on the idea that like artists are just okay with this. Taylor Swift is a perfect example of a contemporary artist who lost control of her contemporary right now work, and she was fucking livid, and so was the public, and rightfully so. She was an artist who, through being young, not necessarily fully understanding contracts, and trusting someone she shouldn't have trusting, lost the control of her right now work, and she was furious.
Yeah, but that's
And
an
she still-
argument for like child contract and contract protections, and not like
Right, but
the
you're
idea
just
of
you're
contracts.
saying that artists just accept the idea that their work can go out of their hands. No, they don't. That's false.
It's
I
just
mean,
not even
wait,
true. I don't know why you would make
obviously
that
to
argument.
a degree, sure, they would understand. Like obviously to a degree, but that's when you sign contracts and make wills for when you die. Like obviously some things they won't be okay with. But at the end of the day, you will be dead, and you'll have to leave like you'll have to leave some responsibility to your work to somebody, or just like give them to the public and then have it in the public record. There it is. And honestly, like if somebody wants to go in and change it, then it's just like it's a.
How does
their
this
work.
translate into license to engage in this literary vandalism? I mean, what gives the public or the estate, right, the privilege to substantively change these works simply because the person has passed on? And
The
why
author.
would we want to? Why would we want to do that? I don't think we
What
You
the
have like
author gave
90
them those
years.
rights with
You
the
have
estate.
90 years on this planet to do something. A lot of people try and make art. They try and write books. They try and make music. They try and create things. Why would you even feel comfortable doing that if you had this specter of people changing your meaning and your context and the things you were trying to do at some point in the future with no guarantee? I mean,
The only thing,
Because humans
the
live for
only-
the here and
real
now,
quick,
and
if
they
I
got
may,
to
if I may,
make
And then me.
as a point of
sure,
privilege
sure.
as a host, I have something to say here. The only thing we really own, right, is our thoughts and our words. This is what bothers me about this. Is it is a violation in a real sense. Even if my words were dog shit, even if my writing was horrible, even if my writing was elementary at best, it's mine. These are my words. These are my works. And if I do not consent or give you permission to edit them, rewrite them, change them, then it is absolutely a violation of my personhood to go in and do that, even if I am dead. And that is what offends me. And I'm being passionate about this because I am passionate about this. It offends me that people think that this is okay. That this is not only okay, but it's actually a good thing that people should do. That people should go take the words of people who have no say anymore and then just entirely change them and represent them as my words. Do not do that. If people from centuries before, centuries from now, somehow come across this video, okay? Do not edit my words. Do not do that. No, I am revoking consent. Okay.
I have an answer to Shark's question, if I may. So like you were asking like if we wanted to go back and like insert problematic things, right? And I think that
Yeah.
like I think that there's enough.
Well, not necessarily go back, but do you think new books should be written with like problematic views, like homophobia, racism, transphobia? So that is it that valuable that it needs to be added into new books for that to happen?
No, okay. The only reason I would advocate for doing something like that is if we wanted to tell a story about today, right? Like if we were talking about today and the things that trans people are going through, then yeah, I would probably include some of those like transphobic views, right? But
because
apart
it's
from
a
that,
product of the time, right?
Right. But I wouldn't like I obviously wouldn't go back and like I wouldn't say I am going to insert as many problematic things as I can so that future people can have a growth curve. I think that there's enough problematic content today that we can kind of build off of. But also as to tag on to what Wick was saying, I think that like something that maybe we're not talking about, and I hate that this is something that's like kind of co-opted by like the monument loving people out there, because I think there is an element of like feeling to this that we're not really sort of acknowledging as valid. Like personally, I think that most of those edits that they've made are kind of make it less fun. I'm not even talking about like the things that replace words for fat phobic and stuff. I think that they've taken out quite a few of those like doll-esque authorial flourishes, and I think that it's kind of I think it's okay to get upset about that. Like if right now we kind of see Terry Pratchett as like this really base writer. Like he's one of my favorite authors, to be honest, and like one of his books is like really transpositive, and this is like from a guy who's like long been dead, not long been dead, but you know, he it's not like he's not exactly a modern writer. But like in the future, if somebody came along and was like, okay, I'm gonna rewrite, I'm gonna find some like old racist views of Terry Pratchett, I'm gonna rewrite them, I'd be very fucking upset, just because like if he has problematic views, I want to see them for myself.
Sure, and once again, you could just
Yeah,
go back
I just
and read
want
the
to
old
say,
books.
fuck your monuments. Fuck them monuments. This ain't got nothing to do with that. Fuck
Yeah,
them.
I don't know.
And I know, Shark, I know you can go back and look at them, but you understand what I'm saying, right? If I read a version of Terry Pratchett that was the sanitized version, and I didn't encounter the real version, if I didn't even know that there was a real version out there, then how like it would be almost by accident that I would find that, right? Especially if it was a more obscure author, or if I didn't do like a lot of research to do to find these, right? Like if this person was never brought into the public light, if this topic was never brought into the public light, how many people do you think would have actually noticed?
How many people actually notice? I think a fair amount, since these books are pretty well known. They're like incredibly well known books. And
I guess what I mean is books in general, though. Like like for example, like the Terry Pratchett one. Like he's a pretty famous author, but he's also like I guess like how many people on this panel have read Terry Pratchett? It's
sure,
kind of
and,
like that.
yeah, and on the idea of like, I think it's something valid to be upset about. I think you can be upset about this, but I think it's more like a nostalgia, and people won't experience things this in this exact same way or a very similar way that I did. So it's bad, or wanting to conserve something simply for the sake of conserving it because not conserving it is bad. More than it's like you're doing a harm or like these, like you're doing harm to this child or something, or they have like a worse experience. And that's really why I asked that like original question, why should those themes be added in specifically so kids can like grow up and be like, oh my gosh, racism's bad? Because if not, then you would have to concede that like those books in and of themselves are a worse experience because of that than books that were written a longer time ago. And I just don't believe that's true.
I think it's a worse.
The
only reason, sorry, I'll say this and then I'm done. I only think it's a worse experience because I would say that it creates more confusion. Because like ultimately, if a kid reads this book, they're not gonna pick up on the fact that like they removed the word fat, but still portrayed Augustus Gloop as like this incredibly gluttonous character everywhere else in the book, right? Like I don't think that kids are really gonna notice it. But it is. I think especially for kids who don't ever like find out about the original versions or whatever. It's just like more confusing in the end. That's the only harm that I see in it.
Possibly, but I just don't think it's any more confusing than like two people who would have like who look at a different translation of like the same work, or a Japanese person and an English person reading the same manga. Like I believe all of these people will be able to have like very similar, if not almost exactly the same experiences, only they're just like very slightly different with the type of words and some themes that could possibly may not make it. But I wouldn't say that this is like morally wrong or bad or worth like throwing like a fit over. If you feel mad about it, I mean, that's okay. It's just like, then at that point, if you're just mad, then it sucks to be you.
Yeah, but I think that like the thing is that I'm saying that it's okay that it's to be mad about it.
Oh,
Yeah, I wanna
and
give,
they're probably gonna
Making the edits
just real
seem
quick,
to be the more
real
sensitive
quick.
ones. That's a good Uno reverse, though.
Real quick, I want to give because Noah, was that your
Yep.
name? I know you had a response, and I want to give our new person
Yeah, I
here.
just want to talk about the fuck your monuments comment, which I completely agree with. I think the idea of fuck your monuments is
oh my gosh,
is completely valid, but it only has power because those monuments exist and they were built in a time and for a reason that was inherently racist or inherently So
Which is why I won't allow that
the
argument to be
power,
co-opted.
yeah, but the power in that is in the taking down of those monuments. When those monuments get taken down, then there is a progression that happens, and people can see a change in the landscape, literally, and that can only happen by those monuments existing in their unadulterated form.
There's
beforehand.
also something to be said about consent here when it comes to like if you're walking down that part of the town or into the town hall or into the government building or institution where these things are present, you don't have a choice whether or not you engage with it. It's just there. Whereas
No,
a
but your
book
choice is to say fuck your monuments. Your choice is to say take this monument down, and that.
I think there's a history in taking down those
Sorry, no, I didn't cut out. I just stopped talking.
Right, and that's the larger point there that I was going to make, and it gets to I think it's Double Shine's earlier point way back, which these phrases "good of society," "progress the society," the conceit and arrogance that's bound up in such phrases, where most of you will just kind of nod your heads in uniform consistency. Who's determining what is the good of society? Who's determining that right now?
Society?
That something. Yeah, who in society? In this case, it was inclusive
everybody
minds.
but you.
Which who the fuck are they? And
well, no, it wasn't inclusive minds. I'm not gonna let you say that it's not
statues.
inclusive minds. It was Puffin, the author. It was Puffin.
Puffin authorized it, but they're relying on inclusive
no.
minds.
Hold on a second. Wait.
Hired them. Puffin
Wait a
hired
second.
them.
Really loud.
Hold on.
Right.
Hold on. Can I look? Okay, look. Right.
Well,
Can we? Are we going to pretend?
I want to get the new guy in.
Who's the new guy?
You're the new guy. You haven't said shit.
He's eating though,
or
so
get,
what the heck?
Well, yeah, I'm
get
obviously.
Michael.
I'm not gonna fucking button. I'm not gonna fucking
not?
button when two nerds are fighting over books. Can I get a TLDR on what you're talking about?
Okay, so you don't know why you're here.
All right.
Okay, goodbye.
Void. So this good of
Speaking of
society
censorship-
conceit is just it's
are
I
we
think it's
conceding?
repressive and oppressive. I don't think that we ought to be relying on these malleable fictions of what is good for society. Look, as our friend up top here, Ice Beans, had mentioned, people write as a product of their time. As we attempt to censor and erase history, right? We are abandoning our intellectual competencies, and on the basis that some people might feel uncomfortable by saying that the Greeks are greasy or that the Turks taste like turkey. Okay, this is where we're at right now. We are already on the slope. Monuments, writing people out of history, writing people out of popular culture resources, right, is just a continuation of this theme on the basis that some tiny minority of the population is now representative of the good of society. And I bet that if the windmill started turning in the other direction, and we started to say, you know what, homophobia is a good thing, transphobia is a good thing, you would not be so easily nodding your head that, oh yeah, this is progressing society. This is the good of society. You wouldn't be doing that. So this intellectual dishonesty has to stop.
What you haven't been able to explain
disagree.
Shark.
You haven't been able to explain any intellectual dishonesty or like whatever else you were talking about. Listen. Okay. Wait. Also, why in the world does the author matter more than the publisher? Aren't they a team? Like, isn't one of the big reasons, or honestly the only reasons why Ronald Dahl's works are as prolific or as popular as they are is because the publisher decided to sign off and actually work with them. That's why the publisher's on the front of the page as well as the author as well.
Doesn't make the work that the publisher
somehow
the publisher is also incredible. The publisher is also liable for what they publish.
Come on now.
Shark,
but I mean,
which is more important, right? The laborer who produces the thing, or the company that can sell the labor? Obviously,
what are you talking?
The laborer, right?
The publisher is also the publisher is literally working with the author to make it's a back and forth.
You know this is illogical. You do not believe that the artist is somehow less valuable than.
I didn't say less valuable.
You don't. Yes, you are implying.
No, I didn't.
Surely the author's desires should trump.
One might say you are begging the question.
Okay, wait. Can we switch tack real quickly and talk about his point about how we would feel about if like there was like a version of the books
the wind's blowing in the other direction?
Yes.
Alright, well,
anti-gay and
but
transphobia
I
suddenly
can't engage
becomes
in
the
this one.
norm.
I have
don't
to
think.
go. I do appreciate you
Okay.
for having me on. I have to go to bed, so I appreciate you. Take care, okay?
Yes, I also
Bye,
need to
Chart.
go, I'm
night.
afraid.
Yes.
Good
We're going to end up
discussion.
soon. It's about 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Methodology, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Chart Zero.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there. If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button. If you don't, it'll make Boo very sad. I know a bunch of you who are watching are not subscribed. Join the frenzy. You won't regret it. Thank you, Boo.